The story begins in a majestic building located on the peak of a high mountain that was part of the Wanjian Plateau. The doors of the exiting cloud sect were usually quiet and not crowded, but today many people had gathered there. The emerging cloud sect was raided. When the bloody battle ended and most of the sect members fell to the floor, a man who seemed to be the commander of the attacking side approached them. Kneeling at the feet of this fearsome invader was the leader of the exiting cloud sect, Mo Lingyun. This man's eyes were filled with true fear. Mo Lingyun knew that this could be the end for his sect. He was about to accept the inevitable when he heard the voice of one of his disciples from behind him. The youth loudly asked the sect leader why he had given up. This disciple was very worried about the strength of the Heavenly Mercy sect. But at the same time he thought that as long as they fought to the end, they would not be defeated. However, the sect leader did not share his point of view. The man firmly stated that he would not risk the future of the sect with such a weak hope. The young man jumped to his feet and walked towards the sect leader. He was full of enthusiasm and fighting spirit. The young man said that he was ready to die fighting for the sect. In this young man's opinion, the leader of the exiting cloud sect could not give up. But all his convictions collapsed the moment the leader slowly turned his head and muttered through clenched teeth that the young man could die but the sect could not. The disciple was stunned to hear this from his master. After these words, he felt betrayed and abandoned. His master put the existence of the sect above the lives of his disciples. Then screams were heard. Mo Lingyun seemed to have gone mad. He pointed his finger at the surviving disciple and addressed the invaders. The man said that they could take this disciple away if they allowed the Cloud Exit sect to continue to exist. Xia Pingqiu, the leader of the invaders, stared dumbfoundedly at the distraught man at his feet. The invader understood that the sect leader was asking him to take away a man who had obtained 5 heavenly talents and had also reached the peak of enlightenment at the age of 16. His strength had reached the might of one elephant, and this disciple's combat effectiveness was no less than that of the sect leader. He was a heaven-sent outstanding hero that was born once every 100 years. There was just one problem. These 5 talents limited each other, and therefore the young man could not use them to their full potential. The student knew this very well, but how this information reached his enemy he could not find out. Xia Pingqiu said with excitement in his eyes that if he took away all of the youth's talents, he would definitely be able to use them in the best possible way. But the disciple of the outgoing cloud sect was clearly against such a plan. The young man pulled his sword from its sheath and asked if the invader was sure that he wanted to take his talents. It seemed that the man had gone berserk and was ready to destroy everything around him. He prepared to attack, swinging his sword. The young man's clothes were torn, and he had almost no strength left after a long battle. But he did not want to say goodbye to his life so easily. The student was ready to stand to the last. The man's heart began to pound violently, as if it was about to jump out of his chest. The young man was very surprised by the vibrations that came from his chest. The student with red eyes clutched his chest. Blood immediately gushed from his mouth. The young man looked at the pain and froze in place, and just a few moments later the man was lying on the cold floor. His weapon was lying next to him, and the young man himself was shaking and vibrating and coughing up blood profusely. His eyes wide in shock and fear, the boy stopped coughing for a moment. He quietly asked how it was possible that his power could disappear. Xia Pingqiu smiled. He turned to the young man and said that the world was not as simple as he thought. After all, for a martial artist, talent would never be the most important thing, but the most important thing was the human heart. Then the elder sister came a little closer to Lin Bei. She advised him to stop fighting, smiling affectionately. A girl with long hair and bright green eyes approached the defeated opponent. She looked at him haughtily and then said that he should be flattered, but Lin Bei didn't want to give up. He glared at the headmaster's daughter, Mo Ying, and shouted that the healing potion he had been given earlier had poison in it. The boy called her a poisonous woman who had ruined him, but then the girl squatted down next to the guy. She kept smiling brightly and then turned to Lin Bei and said that he was talented, so she had to resort to tricks. Otherwise, if he committed suicide by wasting 5 rare talents, how could they survive? The man bent down to the ground again, coughing up blood. His eyes narrowed from the pain in his lungs. At that very moment, lightning lit up the sky, as if even the heavens were against everything that was happening on earth at that moment. But then another man came up wearing black glasses. He had long hair, part of which was tied in a ponytail. He ordered them to stop talking. The same man stretched out his hand towards him. It seemed as if everything around him suddenly lit up with fire, even his eyes sparkled. He said that he would first take away his heavenly talents. From the hand of the man who had once again begun to smile nastily at his opponent, a magic circle appeared right next to Lin Bei's face. Flames were emanating from it in different directions. The defeated youth screamed loudly in pain. Flames began to emanate from his eyes and mouth. At that moment, tears began to appear in his red eyes. From the hand of the man who had once again begun to smile nastily at his opponent, a magic circle appeared right next to Lin Bei's face. Flames were emanating from it in different directions. One was a water dragon hugging the youth's body, the other was in the form of a yellow sword, the other two were in the form of tongues of flame. The man opened his purple eyes wide and smiled as if he was mad. He muttered softly that this body was a vast purgatory of the supreme sword of heaven and an unrivaled hidden breath. He said that this was the blood devil's heaven-destroying body and the thunder demon's heaven-restoring body. In front of him was the devil's face with horns all red and the body of a heavenly bird all blue. The same rays that once belonged to Lin Bei sprouted from Xia Pingshuo's hand. He smiled and said that if one were to obtain one of the heavenly talents, one would become a genius and all 5 of his children would have a great future. And if they were recruited by powers, they would reach the heights and Xia Pingshuo's family would have glory for many generations or even become the greatest family of all time. From the same hand with 5 heavenly talents, several more flames appeared. They surrounded Lin Bei, not allowing him to even move. After a few moments, Xia Pingshuo turned away from his opponent and clenched his fist. He smiled and said that they had obtained 5 heavenly talents and now they had to leave. He then turned to Mo Lingyun saying that if he wanted him to give his Cloud Exit sect a way out, then he would give it to him. But only if his daughter married Xia Pingshuo's youngest son, then Mo Lingyun could continue to be the head of the sect. The man bowed his head in response. And then the rest of them all fell to the ground bowing to the leader. One of them said without raising his head that the Rising Cloud sect thanked the leader Xia Pingshuo. After an indefinite amount of time, rain began to pour from the sky. It was not heavy, but it was clearly felt. The sky was covered with dark clouds blocking the sun, so that it was not visible at all. Lin Bei, lying in the puddle, laughed hysterically. He smirked as drops of water ran down his face. He then asked how that old dog dared to treat him like that after the young man was willing to sacrifice his life for the sect without expecting anything in return. In front of him stood a tall man and next to him was that nasty girl. The older man had a thick mustache as well as bright green eyes. He said that their sect had been collecting resources to train him, and he even treated him as his personal disciple. And so it was time to repay the debt. The old man smiled slightly, his eyes wide open like a madman, and said that Lin Bei's sacrifice would help their sect survive. The man immediately rushed to the weakened body of his student. He told him that he could die happy, and then kicked him in the face. Through the man's shoes on his face, Lin Bei gritted his teeth and said that his opponent was a shameless old dog. But ignoring his words, the man turned to the crowd of people and said that Lin Bei saved the Rising Cloud sect by willingly sacrificing himself. He ordered all the sect members to bow. Lin Bei decided to take a look at them and noticed that all the sect members were giggling and smiling as they looked at him. The daughter of the Mo in Predator Chief smiled and told Lin Bei not to blame her because if there was anyone the defeated youth could blame, it was his own stupidity. A few moments later, the girl ran up to the boy and kicked him. Lin Bei's body responded along with the stones on the floor. The body of a young man all scratched fell from a high cliff. He could not even do anything to avoid his death. And then he fell on the wet grass. He was all in the mud and he had wet clothes on. The young man smiled weakly and narrowed his bright red eyes. But when he closed his eyes, the man felt as if he was descending and flying even lower. It was a smooth sensation, he probably even floated. His body glowed with a bright light and black hands caught him from below. He thought that this was the afterlife. And then the boy decided to gather all his strength. He thought that he did not want to put up with such a fate at all, and therefore decided that he had to take revenge. Lin Bei bared his teeth, trying to get out of the trap of the hands. Suddenly the man found himself in a completely different place. It was completely dark, but stars and rays of light shone brightly in the midst of it. A voice rang out saying that the world was a chessboard and all beings were pieces. Lin Bei's eyes widened in surprise. The voice said that no matter what the world was, love and hate were just pieces on a chessboard intertwining and colliding according to the rules that had already been set. But what if the sky and earth were unkind? Lin Bei was in pure space while being naked. In front of him was a huge glowing planet. The entire space around him was illuminated by stars and comets. There were countless numbers of them. The guy thoughtfully repeated the stranger's question about what to do if the sky and earth are unkind. The answer came to him suddenly. He shouted loudly that in that case he would destroy them. His face was distorted by the anger and resentment he felt. From the place where the man had been parrying all this time, huge blue rays began to appear. They wrapped around him like comets, and new flashes lit up around him. Lin Bei's silhouette darkened for a moment. Closing his eyes, a few moments later the boy found himself lying on the green grass. The sun was already shining brightly, and there was no trace of the rain. He looked up at the sky. Lin Bei carefully touched his clothes and then squeezed them lightly. The young man stood up abruptly from the ground and looked at his palm. He was convulsively swallowing air with his mouth, and his face was distorted in a grimace of horror. He barely audibly said that he was not dead. The man stood up from the grass. Looking around, he noticed a rock. But then he thoughtfully said that even if he had not died by fate, he had lost his talent for martial arts. What was the difference between him and the disabled person now? He thought about what could have happened if he had had another, even the weakest talent. The man looked at his body in horror and then put his hand to his chest. The young man wondered if this was possible, since it was already a miracle for him to awaken 5 heavenly talents. How could he awaken the 6th? And then something hit him hard in the chest. It was as if vibrations passed through Lin Bei's body. The boy wondered in surprise what could have happened, his eyes wide open in amazement. Countless numbers of rays emerged from Lin Bei's body. A strange bluish ball resembling lightning emerged from his chest, and all the rays grew from it. The youth looked at them warily. The man tried to cover his face, but after a few moments the rays became too much. They blinded the young man with their bright light. When the white veil in front of Lin Bei's eyes disappeared, he stood in front of 6 huge statues. 5 of them stood in a circle, and in the center stood the 6th, the largest statue. Those in the circle were burning with different lights such as yellow, blue, blue, red, orange. The man looked at the majestic figures in front of him with fear. He kept thinking about what was in front of him. He assumed that the 5 stone pillars in a circle were his 5 previous talents. The man, through the fiery tongues of 5 pillars, was able to reach the 6th, the largest. He was constrained by goals, and the young man kept thinking about what was constraining his 6th talent. Bei came closer and carefully touched the pillar. But he didn't even have time to touch it. After just a few moments, everything that surrounded the stone tower flew upward, leaving only a huge, strong beam of light below. A white veil appeared before the man again, and in it was the body of primordial chaos. Lin Bei reasoned that in addition to the 5 talents, he also had a 6th. But before this, primordial chaos body suppressed the first 5. But now that the 5 talents were gone, the primordial chaos body had awakened. The reedied youth stretched out his hand and was able to plunge it into his 6th talent. It was like a snow-white abyss of waves. The voice from nowhere spoke again. It asked the child not to forget what it had said. It quoted the words that if the heaven and earth were unkind, Lin Bei would destroy them. The voice asked him to put the words into action. The child smiled excitedly as he looked at the huge beams. And then the man closed his eyes. He only thought with his inner vision. The man screamed that everything that had happened now was not an illusion, it was real. The man pressed his hands to the stems of the beam. At that moment it was as if the same star planet he had already seen appeared in his hand. Several dozen lightning bolts grew out of it. But from the man's hand it was able to quickly move to his eye level. The planet glowed even brighter, illuminating everything around it. Lin Bei cried out again that this was the most fashionable power that was in him, but it was sealed. The young man's feet were once again on the grass. He looked at his hand with admiration. A soft blue fire was emanating from his entire body. The young man muttered that it infused all paths, was close to the laws of heaven and earth, had an unrivaled cultivation speed, and if it was cultivated to its peak it could break all laws and suppress any chi. The reedied youth smiled slyly, saying that with such a powerful talent, he had the ability to cultivate and practice martial arts. And Lin Bei would become stronger than before. The man sat down on the ground and then squeezed one of the stones that lay very close. But after a moment he took his hand off the stone and began to meditate. This was the first great level of combat enlightenment. Behind him a fire was blazing and rays were surrounding him. Lin Bei thought that the sky and earth were filled with spiritual qi. In order to practice martial arts, one must open the acupuncture points in the body so that it can receive energy. Previously it took him more than 10 years to reach the peak of enlightenment. How much would he spend now? In an instant the boy's entire body darkened. Blue lightning pierced him, blue smoke appeared from his eyes. Blue flames sparkled behind him. A huge burst of energy occurred. The lightning that emanated from Lin Bei's body could be seen even on the other side of the forest. It seemed as if even the earth shook from such a force. Lin Bei, his face twisted in surprise, said that 9 acupuncture points were opened in one breath. And in a matter of moments he reached the top level of enlightenment, which usually takes at least 10 years of hard training. He realized how powerful this talent was. Lin Bei, feeling a strange sensation on his forehead, decided to scratch his head. A strange little lightning bolt was coming from the top of his forehead. The youth asked why another point had opened on the top of his head. But then the man almost shouted out that this could very well be the 10th point, the abode of the gods. The young man's eyes widened in amazement at his own thoughts. He remembered the books he read to use his talents. The young man remembered them, that in addition to the 9 points in the body, there is also a dwelling place of the gods which is difficult to open, but martial artists have abandoned it, since the process is extremely dangerous. However, once the dwelling place of the gods is opened, the effectiveness of qi significantly exceeds the previous ones in total. The youth took a fighting stance. He said that he thought that his cultivation speed was already one step ahead of most. And now that he had obtained the heavenly primordial body of chaos that resisted the heavens and opened the point of the abode of the gods, his cultivation speed would become incredible. A few moments later the man decided to swing his heavy fist. For a moment it even seemed as if he was overflowing with anger and strength, and red rays appeared from the young man's eyes. From just one blow, a huge blow passed through the earth, from which stones from the depths of the earth fell and snow-white waves seemed to gush out from the earth. A cut was made on the ground. As if with a knife, Lin Bei was able to cut a fairly large piece of land in front of him. The youth grinned contentedly and turned to Mo Lingyun Mo Ing Xia Pingqiu, the outgoing cloud sect, the heavenly mercy sect, after all their days were already numbered. And then Lin Bei turned around and walked towards the village nearby. He said that old dog Mo Lingyun was already at the pulse expansion level, but he was only at the peak of enlightenment. Therefore the young man would not be able to take revenge yet. First he needed to hit the bottom, and when he reached the meridian expansion level, then he would go for revenge. A rather large stone with an inscription appeared before the man's eyes. It stood next to a small tree. Lin Bei walked further. He came to a busy street. A middle-aged man was carrying 2 baskets, and an old woman and her child were also out for a walk. The boy was chasing a small butterfly. Everyone on the street turned to look at Lin Bei in horror, their faces distorted into a grimace of pure terror. Lin Bei looked at the passers-by with bewilderment, who as soon as they saw him immediately began to run in all directions, the main thing being away from his red eyes. Suddenly an old man came up behind Lin Bei. He asked pitifully if he could ask what else he wanted. The young man only thought about why the people here were so afraid of him. Turning around, Lin Bei smiled and told the old man not to be afraid, as he just wanted to spend the night in the village. His red eyes flashed for a moment. The old man immediately fell to his knees right onto the hard and cold asphalt. A man with long gray hair and a mustache, kneeling and almost in tears, asked for only one thing: to spare them, because they had no money left in the village. The young man felt very awkward looking at the old man. He smiled nervously, but he himself looked at the old man almost with horror. In the headman's house, straw hats, various dried plants were visible, and there were also shelves set aside specifically for books. The same sweet old man said with an awkward smile to Lin Bei, who was sitting at the table in his house. There was soup on the table as well as 4 buns. The village chief said that the village was so poor that they could only afford to set the table for the young man once, so he hoped that the boy would not be offended. The little girl who was standing next to him looked at her grandfather pitifully. The man took it and was able to bite off half of the bun that the headman offered him in one piece. Lin Bei, who had already stuffed his mouth with food, and was also holding a bun in his hand, asked the old man what the Rising Cloud sect had done to him to make him so poor. The old man sighed heavily and replied that their village used to be prosperous, but the Chuyun clan's annual taxes gradually increased, and after another increase they were no longer able to pay them. The old man said that especially in the past 2 years the Ascending Cloud sect, which seemed to tower over everyone, demanded payment of 1-star beast crystal core every month. Therefore the young people of the village had to hunt beasts day and night. For example, to surround the huge magical beast with glowing eyes. But after the old man said imagining the crystal core of the demonic beast, it was something completely pure, watery cold to the depths of the soul. He said that by that time there were less than 20 able-bodied men left in the village. The young man immediately jumped up from his seat, calling the sect scoundrels. He was still clutching the bun in his hands, which he still couldn't finish. The old man's forehead had already turned red. The old man exhaled heavily again and said that not only were many villages living even worse than them, not only did they have to pay with demonic beast cores, but also the beautiful girls in their villages were taken away by the Chuyun clan. Lin Bei was shaking with anger. His face was distorted with anger. He thought about how ever since he joined the Rising Cloud sect, he had never stepped outside the mountain, devoting himself entirely to studying martial arts. But he never imagined that the sect would be so old and dirty. But trying to recover from the sudden attack of anger, the boy asked the old man what year and month it was. The old man was clearly surprised by such a question, but answered that the month was April and the year was Tenmu. The man's mouth, full of crumbs from food, slightly opened in amazement. He thought that he couldn't believe that he had been in a coma at the foot of the mountain for a month. The old man grabbed his head with one hand and took the little girl's hand with the other. He advised the young man to eat and rest and then leave this not very peaceful place as soon as possible. But the young man didn't even turn around at the old man's words. Only thoughts about the emerging cloud sect were spinning in his head. The next day, a group of young men were walking outside the village. They were carrying the body of a huge boar on a leash with horses. One of them said that tomorrow was Mo Ing's wedding, and he couldn't believe that they had hunted a 2-star demon beast today. Another colleague replied that if he gave it as a gift, the boss would definitely be very pleased. Another man replied with dissatisfaction that it was not bad. A demonic beast comparable to the peak of enlightenment level. If the team had not been lucky that this demonic beast had just given birth and its body was weak at this time, they would not have defeated it. Another interlocutor also joined their dialogue. He raised his nose and said that this was still a demonic beast at the peak of the enlightenment level if it were at the height of its powers, except for the sect leader, only the elder brother could kill it. At that very moment he was slapped. And then they asked him again what exactly he had said. The man who had only mentioned his older brother was already almost coughing up blood. The man rubbed his cheek that was burning with pain and then said that he was mistaken. And he thought about how he could forget that since senior brother Lin Bei had willingly sacrificed himself for the sake of peace in the outgoing cloud sect, his name could no longer be mentioned. All 3 men except the wounded one looked towards the village with enthusiasm. One of them said that they would first go to the village to rest and then return to the sect. They immediately changed the direction of the cart and took the wild animal to the village. Lin Bei was still sleeping at the headman's. Even the bright morning rays could not wake him up. He lay quietly enjoying his own sleep, but after only 1 moment he woke up with fear. The guy's head was filled with only the thought that something was wrong. He opened his red eyes with fear. The man immediately ran out of his room and headed for the exit of the house. The young man opened the wooden door. In front of young Lin Bei's eyes there was a picture of an old man being kicked by a smiling boy. A little girl was lying nearby. The man arrogantly asked if they were going to offer him a disciple of the cloud exiting sect these scraps. He asked if the chief wanted to humiliate him. The girl who yesterday stood pitifully next to her grandfather was now lying not far from him. Her entire childish body was shaking and her gaze was fixed on her loved one. The old man lying on the floor and barely opening his eyes said that they really had very little food. The man immediately frowned deeply. Lin Bei's forehead turned red with anger, and he hissed through his teeth that Tang Su deserved to die. The man who had kicked the old man a minute earlier turned around and shouted out a question about who had said that. He ordered him to show himself. Without thinking twice, Lin Bei decided to actually show himself. He walked out of the crowd approaching Tang Sun. Tang Sun recoiled barely audibly, saying that this was his elder brother. Cloud sect located in one village looked at the elder brother with a questioning or even frightened look, asking a silent question about how he was able to survive. The elder brother came much closer to the man who had offended the old man, and then said that he thought that Tang Su was a good man, but he turned out to be a real scoundrel. The fat man trembled violently in fear of the one who should already be dead. Tanya Su was about to boil over with anger and not understanding in an instant. He thought about what was happening, remembering how his elder sister had thrown him off the cliff. The man wondered how a person who had lost all of his cultivation could still be alive, because that was impossible. Tang Su smiled lightly after a moment, his anger gone, spreading his arms out to the sides and saying that he couldn't believe Lin Bei was lucky enough to be alive. His finger at him, saying that now Lin Bei was just a cripple, so what right did he have to stand in front of him and say anything? He told him to kneel down and then he would let him go because of that sacrifice for the sect. But without thinking twice, Lin Bei calmly hit the man, giving him a strong slap. From such force, Tang Su flew a couple of meters away from his opponent. All the other people accompanying him immediately began to call out and address their brother Tang Xiu. They all started calling out to him in an instant. After turning away from their opponent, Lin Bei pulled the shaking girl by the shoulders into the crowd of people. He asked him to help them into the house so they could rest. All the people in the village tried to help the elder. One of them practically led the elder home by the hand, while another carried a little girl home in his arms. Su, who had already managed to get up from the dirty floor, spoke to him. He rubbed his neck and then asked how he was able to avoid becoming a mere mortal. Bei approached him at the same moment. He walked slowly, measuredly, but confidently closer to Tang Xiu. His eyes were slightly sparkling, and the boy himself frowned when he looked at his opponent. A moment later, Lin Bei was able to kick the man in front of him in the chest. The boy began to cough up blood, creating a small pool of blood. The reedied youth leaned towards the man, and with a frown on his face, showing all the resentment and anger, he said to Tang Su died. The sect man still shouted that he would not give up. Countless veins appeared all over his face. He opened his eyes wide in pain and suffered. The reedied man leaned closer and then narrowed his eyes. Around Tang Su, a huge orange beam grew out of it. Even Lin Bei froze for a moment and then twitched from how much the ground cracked. Tang Su shouted that since the initiation, Lin Bei had always been ahead, but now he was getting in his way again, but he would not give up. And then the man tried to punch Lin Bei. Behind the attacker was his magic, a fire tiger ready to kill any opponent. But the reedied man only smirked and then said that this was a low-grade yellow-level martial art, the Lionheart Fist. The man's face immediately distorted as he was doused with Lin Bei's magic. The enemy's beams of power were immediately imprinted on his neck. Lin Bei was able to disable the enemy with just one blow. Tang Xiu's body responded upward. The man began to cough up blood, and the fire dragon did nothing to Lin Bei at all. Seeing his opponent fall from his blow, the man smiled. He said that it was a low-grade yellow-level martial art, they should be ashamed to use it on him. Lying on the floor, Tang Su frowned and asked if Lin Bei could handle the consequences of killing him. After all, he would always be an outcast from their Cloud Exit sect. And even if he restored cultivation, as if you couldn't cause any upheaval. How could Lin Bei compete with the sector without the support of physique talent? The guy exclaimed that Lin Bei didn't know yet that all his talents had been passed on to the sons of the Heavenly Mercy sect leader. Now they had become great geniuses who could master anything. They were also part of the supreme power, and their strength would steadily increase. And his beloved sister teacher Mo Ying was getting married to Xie Fei of the Heavenly Mercy sect tomorrow. Pointing his finger at Lin Bei, Tang Su said that it was just a joke. And then he laughed. A moment later, the guy hit the opponent lying on his back again. A huge beam of yellow energy appeared around him, as if cutting through the space around him. The man looked at Tang Su's body with misunderstanding. He frowned and said that he was still talking nonsense. The man looked indifferently at the boy all this time, who was already lying in an incomprehensible pose among a mountain of stones. But the other members of the sect were afraid to even approach those two men. The man looked at the crowd to his right with surprise and caution. For a moment it seemed as if his eyes like two rubies sparkled. All those men immediately fell to their knees. One of them begged for mercy, calling Lin Bei his elder brother. The youth immediately replied that he was no longer their elder brother. The man's face distorted with aggression. He frowned deeply and then said that he would now ask questions and those men would answer. And if he noticed even a drop of hesitation, the same thing would happen to them as to Tang Su. They all bowed their heads to the ground, afraid to cast even one more sideways glance at the reedied man who had once been a kind older brother. They said they would answer every question. The man turned to them, shook his head, asked what happened to the Cloud Exit sect and the Heavenly Mercy sect after he left for a month. He told them to remember to tell him in as much detail as possible. One of the men raised his head and said that he would tell them. He said that ever since he had willingly sacrificed himself in exchange for peace in the outgoing Cloud sect, the Patriarch had decided to marry Sister Mo Ing to the youngest son of the Heavenly Mercy sect. They would be getting married tomorrow. Lin Bei's eyes flashed unkindly in response. He ordered the man to tell him what he didn't know yet. The man with a trembling voice began to speak again. He said that the Patriarch of the Heavenly Mercy sect and each of his sons were able to enter the highest class sects, the Divine Scorching Sun, the School of Inexhaustible Swords, the Temple of the Countercurrent, and the School of Heavenly Power. As for the youngest son of the Patriarch of the Heavenly Mercy sect, he entered the Temple of Sealed Demons. Suddenly an obvious thought came to the man's mind. Lin Bei remembered that the Cloud Exit sect was just one of the small sects located in a corner of Dongjiang. His eyes widened in astonishment. But these few top-class sects are all the continent's overlord has. On the ground, it's like the sun marking the locations of the sections. He heard Mo Lingyun mention the Sealed Demon Temple. Every elder in this temple has the cultivation of the 5th level of the Meridian Expansion stage. And in the temple itself there are several dozen of these elders. But everything has a reflection. One of the men said that if the elder brother was going to take revenge, he should think better of it, since Xie Pingqiu's 4 sons had already left the sect. Another said that Xie Fei might still be here, but his cultivation had already reached the 1st level of the Meridian Expansion stage. Another said that in addition the Sealed Demon Temple had sent elders to escort Xie Fei. Lin Bei responded by clenching his fists in annoyance and frowning while clenching his jaw. He thought that this was probably a curse, and then the man exhaled heavily and said that he was not going to kill them. He closed his eyes tiredly. The 3 men bowed again, falling to their knees before their elder brother and thanking him. But Lin Bei had already extended his hand towards them, from which a small yellow ball flew out. He said that he should, however, erase their memories. One of the guys was immediately struck by a ball of lightning. It resembled a gnarled yellow beam, and when the magic hit a person it was as if it was smashing against a stone. The same thing happened to the other man. His eyes also turned yellow. He was very scared, and the same thing happened to the 3rd man. But he was more confused than afraid. When the procedure was over, Lin Bei said that they were free to go. The 3 men rose from their knees and walked away from the village. True, they were slightly burning from the place where the lightning had struck the young man. The man thought that there was a certain probability that a demonic core would be born in the body of the 2-star monster. If he could refine it, perhaps he could reach the Meridian Expansion stage. However, even so, he would not be an opponent for the temple elder. That meant he would have to postpone his revenge. The boy decided to go into the elder's house. There on the bed he noticed the little girl and the old man on the same bed. They were both suffering from pain left over from the beating. They were surrounded by a small number of people. Bei entered the house and said that they could not stay here any longer. Let them rest tonight, and tomorrow he would take them out of here and find another place. The people were rather frightened by this news. It was clear from their faces that they did not want to say goodbye to their beloved and native home. After some time, when the young man had already left the elder's house with sad silence and came to the peaceful forest, the man was carrying a wild animal with one hand. He lifted it with ease, although it was huge. After a few more steps, Lin Bei threw the beast forward. For a moment it seemed as if even the ground shook. The young man looked at the body of the slain animal with joy. He stroked it, saying excitedly that he had finally found the core of the monster. The man's eyes ran over the animal's body with joy. But then, when weak vibrations appeared from his stomach, the man exclaimed in surprise at the guess that the beast was still alive. The young man's good mood instantly evaporated. Then the vibrations from the beast's belly became even stronger. as if someone was knocking directly from the animal's body. The man looked at the body carefully with his red eyes. He asked a rhetorical question about whether there was something inside. With one sharp blow, the man decided to find out the answer to this question. Opening the belly of the beast, something glowing with a bright golden light appeared in front of him, as if he had found something insanely precious or sacred capable of saving the world. But in front of him, in the belly of the beast, lay a small golden bird. It was burning with a bright golden fire. Lin Bei immediately realized that this was the monster's baby. Having taken the bird out of his stomach, it had already stopped glowing. He simply looked at it, holding it in his arms. The young man said irritably that the baby was very small, but suddenly the bird's eye lit up again. It seemed to illuminate the entire universe, replacing the sun. The light was very blinding. The man, in order not to get burned, decided to let the bird go and save his hands, but the baby monster decided to incinerate everything that was behind the young man with one of its eyes. The young man asked with a surprised mouth how a newborn monster could have such a frightening ability. He thought that it could be a mutated demonic beast. The bird, having flown away from the young man for a couple of meters, almost caused a volcanic eruption. The boy thought about how monsters originated from animals that absorbed the essence of the sun and moon. As for demonic beasts, they were the offspring of heaven and earth. The probability of a monster giving birth to a demonic beast was 1 in a million. It was as if it was always a surprise to monsters what would hatch from the golden egg. The golden egg could crack, causing all the forest dwellers to go into a stupor. Something completely new could emerge from the shell. Something with red eyes, for example. The youth thought that every demonic beast once born was capable of reaching 3 stars, and the cultivation level was at the peak of the meridian expansion stage. Taking the chick in his hands, the man smiled slyly. He laughed, thinking that the heavens themselves were favoring him. After all, this was a 3-star demonic beast. And then he began to think about what he could do with this little one. The man brought his finger to his teeth and bit it until blood gushed out. At the same time smiling slyly, he said that tomorrow he would give a luxurious gift for CFA and Mo Ing's wedding. And after just a few moments, the man himself once again presented his finger, on which there was blood, to the monster's key. The chick immediately began to drink it. When the bird finished drinking, the blood flowed continuously from the boy's finger. Lin Beshi himself looked like a zombie or a corpse after losing so much blood. He turned to the boy, saying that the little one had devastated him. The chick just looked at the face of the young man in front of her in surprise. She thought that she would like to ask her mother what happened. When the young man noticed the confusion on the baby's face, he decided to scratch the chick a little. A very strong slap with just one wing so that he would not touch her again. The little bird smiled sadly, thinking about what he had done wrong to deserve such a fate. After all, he had just wanted to practice with all his heart, and his Taoist partner had betrayed him. He had somehow found a way to intersect with the dying body, but this brat had made a master-servant contract with him. And he didn't like it. The man looked at the baby with pity and asked if perhaps this demonic beast was underdeveloped due to premature birth. The chick was stunned for a moment. A moment later, the villager immediately rushed to the man's hand to bite him as painfully as possible. The chick thought that this man himself was underdeveloped and his family was the same. The man tried to throw the chick off, and he succeeded. He waved his hand several times, and in the end the little one just got hit and then fell like a stone. Lin Bei cried out that he was actually in pain. The man immediately began to blow on the open wound. Several streams of blood flowed from there. The young man, trying not to cry, said that it hurt a lot. Falling onto the green grass, the little bird thought that this was the power of a saint-rank bloodline. The little one didn't feel very good about falling so hard either. The young man immediately ran up to the bird and squatted down. He asked the little one what had happened to her. He was very worried about the child. His eyes showed it, trying to find damage on the body. The child had been lying on the grass all this time, covering his face with his hands. He frowned sternly and thought that the body he had transmigrated into belonged to a 3-star demonic beast. If he did not resist, he might miss the opportunity to take revenge forever, so he must not give up. Suddenly, instead of the blue sky, there was a dark blue one shimmering into a pink space. Among it were snow-white rays of fire, and next to them burned the familiar flame. The bird soared among all the flames, rising to the required height and not allowing itself to fall. He thought about how just one drop of blood had caused this body to grow from a 3-star to a 4-star. The improved bloodline simply shocked the little bird. When all the flames had passed, the little one fell onto the grass and began to admire his own wings. He was very tired, sweat was running down his feathers and all his cheeks were burning red. He thought that if he had had such a heavenly talent in his previous life, he would not have been stuck at the emperor stage. Lin Bei looked at the bird with surprise, not even knowing what to do. The little one noticed this when she turned to stare at the one with whom her revenge was just around the corner. The man suddenly walked closer to the demonic beast and carefully grabbed it by the skin. And then the young man put him on his hand and began to stroke the place where he held him. He smiled tenderly and asked the baby not to bite anymore because from now on he would live with him. But the bird's finger stroke on the head did not cause any emotion of wild delight. He looked at the young man in front of him with irritation, thinking that the chick would have to stay with him as long as he was useful. But when the little one used all of Lin Bei's blood to increase his own cultivation, he would kill the guy first. But the boy smiled, slyly ignoring the baby's face. He playfully said that considering how the chick looked, he would call him Golden One. When the man tried to stroke the baby even harder, he made a characteristic sound of displeasure. Extending his other hand, the man addressed the Golden One, saying that he needed to clear the monster's core so that the chick could protect it. A magical blue circle appeared before the young man's eyes. A bright light emanated from it, illuminating everything nearby. The chick sat proudly nearby. Then, after a few moments, a small, brightly glowing golden ball emerged from the body of the adult beast through the blood. It resembled the sun. When the ball ended up in the young man's hands, he was happy about it, but his excitement was greater than his other emotions. So the guy just said that it was time for them to start. At that moment, Lin Bei sat down to meditate on the cold grass. A magical bluish circle of sun and blue rays appeared around him. They twisted and went into the very sky. The little one sitting next to him thought that it was shameless to ask a newly hatched chick for protection. The same yellow ball soared into the sky. It was surrounded by sunbeams emanating from it in a circle. They glowed brightly, illuminating the dark space behind them. The chick, who had been sitting motionless until then, decided to pay attention when the bright sunlight reached even him. From the man's mouth, rays of light emanated surrounding the golden ball. The little guy frowned and then thought about how an ordinary warrior at the peak of the enlightenment stage would need at least 10 days to refine the core of a 2-star monster. But this guy had completed the refinement with just one stick of incense. This was a result that one could only envy. A new sunbeam began to grow from the man's head. It resembled flowers. On the shoulders, forehead, arms, chest, and legs, new bright dots appeared reminiscent of stars. As if something completely new was about to emerge from them, the man raised his head upward. 2 beams flew out of his mouth. They were much stronger than the previous ones and went far into the sky, creating blue threads with stars there. The man, raising his head higher and higher, launched the beam further and further. Large yellow circles began to appear around him. The bird couldn't tear himself away from such a sight. He covered his face with a wing and admired it, thinking about how incredible this impulse was. From afar, it looked like a huge explosion. Waves of light were absorbed by every tree around. Dust was gathering nearby, and the axes around the explosion were growing ever larger. And then, before the bird's eyes, everything was covered in a gray fog. There was a lot of smoke left after the explosion. The chick covered his beak with his wings and simply closed his eyes and then opened them when he thought it was necessary. Dark gray clouds of dust hovered around him. But then he saw someone else's boots ahead. Because of them, the clouds on the ground began to disappear and dissipate. The young man in front of the little boy had his outerwear torn apart by the explosion. But Lin Bei only smiled cheerfully, saying that the monster's dual-core core had allowed him to break through from the enlightenment stage to the first level of the meridian expansion stage. He took the chick on his hand and told his little Goldie that he had done well. The bird decided to take a look at the naked male body. He thought that this body was very tempting. And after that, the dust clouds had almost dispersed. The man stood in front of the forest and endless green grass. There was a bird sitting on his hand, and he himself informed Xiefei and Mo Ying that he was already on his way. Early in the morning, the emerging cloud sect was quite quiet. Only near one building was a crowd of residents. They were all walking towards the house decorated with red ribbons. In that building, an elderly man and a young beautiful girl met all the guests. She was wearing a red long beautiful dress. She smiled brightly at all the guests, but her father greeted everyone cheerfully. Mo Ying's father laughed sadly and then looked at his daughter. He told her that when she married CFA, the girl should do her marital duty well and not upset her husband. The young and beautiful girl agreed, telling her father that she understood it perfectly. The gentle smile never left her face for a moment. The mustache patriarch also smiled brightly. He said that CFA had already passed the initiation ceremony in the sealed demon temple and became a core disciple. And after they got married, their emerging cloud sect would be able to enter new heights. Moin and the patriarch noticed strange people who decided not to come but to fly to their wedding. The man with green eyes was very surprised for a moment, and then the smile disappeared from his face. Two people came to them. One was an elderly man with a large exposed belly. He had black glasses and a long winter coat and a belt with a heart in the center. The patriarch greeted the elder Zhao and his companion in the red cloak. Taking off his glasses, Zhao Yu smiled widely. His gray eyes became visible. It was the elder of the sealed demon temple. He extended his palm towards the patriarch. Zhao's companion was CFA, a disciple of the sealed demon temple. He immediately ran up to his bride and looked at her with a loving gaze, which the girl responded to. The guy said that it was already late and they needed to start as soon as possible. Zhao told Fei that there was no need to rush since they had not yet gathered. The groom immediately apologized, saying that the elders were right. He awkwardly scratched his hair, smiling happily like a child. The patriarch smiled like a madman and then asked Patriarch Mo to get ready to begin. The bride's father also agreed. He joined his two palms and bowed his head before the elder of the sealed demons. The bride and groom immediately went out holding hands with all the guests who had arrived. A voice rang out announcing that the Soaring Bird School was presenting the core of the two-star monster. They conveyed sincere congratulations to Mr. Xie and Mrs. Mo. The voice continued. It said that the Iron Fist School was giving away a two-star body tempering pill, and the Black Bear School was giving away a two-star Black Bear sword. All the people began to climb up ladder carrying gifts for the newlyweds. Patriarch Mo thought about how all these sects had looked down on them recently. And there were some guests who didn't bring anything at all. They stayed away from all the gifts. One of them was dressed in a black cloak with purple elements. And underneath he was wearing a suit and a black mask from which one red eye was peeping out. Lin Bei smiled slyly, lifting his hood slightly. He thought that they had quite a lot of gifts at the wedding. Golden sat on the young martial artist's sleeve and looked rather sleepy. The magical beast yawned and thought about how his master had come here to cause trouble. The little bird glanced at everyone present once more and assessed their strength. The leader of the emerging cloud sect was superior to everyone here. As soon as the little bird looked at him, the man began to speak. He loudly thanked everyone present for coming today. The wedding ceremony was about to begin. The bride and groom, dressed in red, were already ready to walk down the aisle. The sect leader's daughter Ing placed her hand in her groom's and smiled. Suddenly a loud male voice was heard. A young man in a cloak ran out of the crowd of invited guests and shouted for the ceremony to be stopped. He nimbly climbed the steps and was about to run to the very top, to where the newlyweds were standing. The head of the sect noticed the strange young man and looked at him with a bit of contempt and incomprehension in his eyes. The man raised both eyebrows and asked if he could find out from the guest what had happened and why he was making such statements. When Lin Bei approached the sect leader, his face was slightly exposed due to the hood of his robe slipping off his head. Even so, no one recognized him. The youth said that he had not yet managed to give the main gift. Smiling, Mo Lingyun clasped his hands in front of him and asked what the main gift was. The man was clearly not prepared for this wedding ceremony to be so brazenly interrupted by some strange youth, and while the poor guy was trying to remember who this man was standing in front of him, and whether he was on the list of invited guests, the former disciple of the sect began to act harshly and radically. He was going to tear off his robe, reveal his identity, and then kill everyone present. As soon as the purple-trimmed cape was torn off and the guest's face was revealed, he immediately said that the main gift would be the heads of all those present. His words inspired genuine horror in all who happened to hear them. Bei's face first. It was fortunate that the youth was facing them when he tore off his robe. All these men were shocked by what they saw. The newlyweds also immediately realized who was standing in front of them. Moreover, Mo Lingyun's daughter could not believe in this miraculous return to life, as she clearly remembered how she had thrown this scoundrel off the cliff with her own hands. The disciples of the emerging cloud sect felt no better than everyone else present. A month ago they had collectively and unanimously agreed to believe the story that this person who stood before them now had sacrificed himself for the good of the sect. Lin Bei asked for his clothes and transferred the magical beast to his shoulder. After a few seconds of deathly silence, surprised cries rang out. No one could believe that the person standing in front of them was the same Lin Bei from the Cloud Exit sect. In fact, ever since he came to the village, the young man had no desire to hear his name associated with the name of this treacherous sect. The leader Mo Lingyu stared at the boy with an unblinking gaze and continued to point his index finger at him, repeating the same thing. The man couldn't believe that this young man had restored his cultivation in just a month and had also reached the peak of the enlightenment stage. This simply couldn't be true. It didn't fit into this sect leader's worldview. The sect leader's daughter Ing took a step forward. Her legs were shaking slightly from the shock she had just experienced. She also couldn't believe that this man was still alive after all she had done. The bride knew for sure that the poor guy's body had been poisoned and his talents had been taken away. Her pupils shrank even more as soon as she allowed the thought of Lin Bei returning to this world as a demon. Her husband, on the other hand, did not understand the girl's worries. While everyone present fell into a stupor, the young man slowly walked towards them. He looked menacingly at all his enemies who had poisoned his life for so long and then decided to kill him altogether. The young man said through clenched teeth that today was the day of their death. The fiancé of the head of Mo Lingyu's daughter seemed to be unfazed by this sudden resurrection from the dead. He smirked and asked how the young man dared to say such arrogant words. For some reason this man now thought that his strength was superior to Lin Bei's. The bride looked at the man who was about to become her husband and asked him to be careful. Her face looked like she was really very excited. But Xie Fei, no matter what, was not going to listen to the girl. The man was too self-confident. He said out loud and directly that this youth had lost his former strength, and even if he managed to get his cultivation base back in a month, how could he be his opponent? His fiancée tried to object and warn the groom, but in addition to being self-confident, he was also stubborn as a ram. Xie Fei thought that the girl had just doubted his abilities, and now he intended to prove her and everyone else wrong. Therefore, he immediately stepped forward and purposefully walked straight towards certain death in the person of Lin Bei. The girl told him after him that she did not mean that at all, but no one was listening to her anymore. If he had listened to her words now, then who knows, maybe he would have avoided his sudden death. The man walked up to Lin Bei and said that he recognized that he was an incomparable genius when he had the 5 heavenly talents. This was a direct hint that, in the eyes of the groom, Lin Bei was now some kind of low-ranking nobody. Although the man didn't know what kind of opportunity he had come across to come here, it didn't matter to anyone right now. Xie Fei said that he would personally make sure that the former disciple of the outgoing cloud sect would have the most despicable end. Lin Bei wasn't going to just sit back and remain silent, since it wasn't he who needed to be afraid, it was him who needed to be afraid. The youth said that Xie Fei's cultivation had apparently grown significantly in this month. But if the poor guy saw Lin Bei's past, he wouldn't be able to even think about fighting him. The man said that he had no intention of arguing. His cultivation had indeed increased to the first level of the Meridian expansion stage this month. Even if Lin Bei was at his peak right now, he would not be a worthy opponent for Xie Fei. At least that was what this arrogant man thought. Xie Fei warned Lin Bei to prepare to die right then and there. But in response to this sentence, the former sect disciple simply licked his lips and quietly said that he was already hungry. What he meant was that he had not fought against strong opponents for a long time. Lin Bei stood still as Xie Fei ran towards him with all his might, preparing to strike him. It seemed that this was not a fierce battle but just some friendly duel. But it was a pity that only Lin Bei thought so. Xie Fei addressed everyone present, saying that today was a momentous day for him, but Lin Bei was brazen and arrogant. The man firmly believed that if he did not kill him, wouldn't the outgoing cloud sect, the heavenly mercy sect, and the sealed demon temple all lose face. The man looked forward angrily and extended his index finger. He said that today, in front of everyone, he would personally kill the young martial artist. The disciples of the various sects began to talk among themselves. No one understood what that man was planning and why they had such a strange feeling that he had forgotten something. Suddenly the voice of one of the elders was heard. The elder said that Lin Bei had previously been under the tutelage of the Enlightenment stage and was no weaker than Mo Lingyun. But now Xiafei was at the first level of the Meridian expansion stage, and the Sealed Demon Temple elder was also present. In this man's opinion, this behavior was equivalent to suicide. The Sealed Demon Temple elder stood to the side and watched the entire scene unfold. He thought that Lin Bei had lost his talents. The man did not understand at all why this young man decided to come here today. But there was something strange about the behavior of this exiled disciple. The elder of the Sealed Demon Temple noticed that the young master did not look scared at all. He decided to calmly watch what would happen next. At this time, Xiafei lost the last bit of self-control. Several restraining seals appeared on his face, and he himself shouted that Lin Bei was preparing for his sudden death. The disciples of the emerging cloud sect were horrified and shocked. This was the first time in their lives that they saw what the body of the vast purgatory looked like. In their opinion, this ability looked terrifying. All the seals that appeared on the young master's face indicated that the majestic killing aura of only the first level of the Meridian expansion stage was no weaker than the second level. While they were talking among themselves, the man used a yellow-ranked top-class technique. This strange technique was the killing fist. The man could count on the fact that just by attacking with the killing fist, his opponent would immediately fall to the ground. But if it was that simple, Lin Bei would not have come to fight today. The expelled disciple snorted as he looked at the technique that was about to attack him. Such an attack would only work on a lower-ranked master, which unfortunately for his opponent he was not. A loud explosion sounded, and then a fire burst out right in the middle of the place where the ceremony was being held. This meant that the attack had hit a target. Xiafei was firmly convinced that his new opponent was already dead. The man dusted off his hands and clothes, thinking that it was easy to overthrow such an opponent. The man's eyes filled with righteous anger. He began to look down on the world again. Now he wanted to tell his wife that she was wrong. The daughter of the head of the outgoing cloud sect also breathed a sigh of relief. She thought that she was probably sending her fiancé to death, but it seemed that Lin Bei was just pretending to be so mysterious. Suddenly Xiafei's eyes widened sharply and his pupils narrowed. From the man's expression, it was immediately clear that he was very surprised by something, and even somewhat scared. When the fog and smoke cleared, there stood an unharmed opponent in front of him. The former disciple of the emerging cloud sect asked, "Is this all this man can do with his vast purgatory body?" In fact, this man's attack was quite worthy of the body of the immense purgatory. His strength was not inferior to the second level of the Meridian expansion stage, but for Lin Bei this was a piece of cake. Xiafei still couldn't believe that his opponent had miraculously survived such a strong attack. He was showing that it was impossible, and he didn't understand what had happened. The man looked extremely surprised. Then the former disciple of the Cloud Exit sect seemed to be enraged. The magical beast flew up from his shoulder, and the man said that it was his turn to attack. From the expression on the man's face, it was clear that no one would likely survive his attack. Space and time split around the two from where you started pouring blue light. It seemed like the heavens themselves split and sent some strange rays of magical energy to the ground. At this time, Lin Bei's magical beast was flying somewhere in the sky. The expelled disciple was attacking the man who was supposed to get married today. The groom knew that he couldn't resist the attacks of this master. He couldn't understand how this disciple could restore his strength in just a month. Everyone had long believed that Lin Bei was dead. But in fact he was here. He was standing right in front of everyone, alive and well. Not only had this man survived, but he had also refined his strength. After the 5 heavenly talents were taken away from him, he should have been nothing more than an ordinary mortal. Well, no one expected that such a person would be able to defeat the sect leader's son in a fair fight. Xiafei was at a loss when Lin Bei's punch landed directly on his chest. His body was immediately overcome with terrible pain. A drop of blood was carefully dripped onto the ground. It was unknown to whom they belonged because of the opponents. Most likely the groom simply could not withstand the blow of the expelled student. In addition, there was so much that the person losing it could die any minute. Lin Bei took a step away from his opponent. Now a very interesting picture opened up before everyone's eyes. The groom's chest had a hole in the blanket. The expelled disciple's attack had pierced his body. The man couldn't believe that Lin Bei had reached the meridian expansion level, but just as he opened his mouth to express his bewilderment, the former disciple of the outgoing Cloud sect slapped him in the face. After this slap, Xie fell to the ground. He could not get up as the unbearable pain and the oppressive feeling of guilt towards everyone present were pulling him to the bottom of some unknown abyss. But Lin Bei didn't stop. He wanted to make all these people do the same thing that they did to him. The man turned Xie head sideways and stepped on it with his foot. He repeated everything that this man did to him. The man then asked his fallen and defeated opponent if that was all he could do, then why did he even bother to fight? The man also added that the son of the leader of the emerging Cloud sect had greatly disappointed him. The entire crowd was truly shocked. No one could believe that the great warrior Xie could not withstand even one blow from this exiled man and was now lying unconscious on the cold ground. The girl couldn't believe that Lin Bei had managed to awaken a heaven-level talent again. She looked at the young man with undisguised surprise in her eyes, but there was also irritation in her gaze. The sealed demon sect leader thought that Xie had a body of immense purgatory and possessed a strength comparable to the second level of the meridian expansion stage. Moreover, a heavenly level talent could easily suppress warriors of the same level, but he could not even catch Lin Bei's movements. In this man's opinion, this kid was truly unique. If this man had awakened a stronger heaven-level talent again, shouldn't he have taken advantage of this opportunity? The demon sect leader bit his lip. This man thought that if he took away this talent and used it, even the head of the temple would have to treat him with respect. From now on, all followers would have to obey the head of the sealed demon sect. He walked towards where Lin Bei was standing. The man's steps were tinged with purple light. Every place he stepped on was immediately scorched by a strange magical flame. The man looked forward angrily and extended his index finger. He said that today, in front of everyone, he would personally kill the young martial artist. The daughter of the head of the outgoing Cloud sect was afraid of something again. The girl didn't even understand what was making her so afraid. She knew very well that Elder Zhao was at the 5th level of the meridian expansion stage, and even if Lin Bei was a super genius, he wouldn't be able to handle something like this. The demon sect leader swung at the fire to deal a powerful blow to his opponent. This was one of his secret techniques. No one knew how to deal with this blow. Usually this particular blow would be fatal to all his opponents. The blow hit the poor exiled disciple's body directly. But it was not fatal for him. He managed to dodge in time and jumped back somewhere. Fortunately or unfortunately, Lin Bei was not a fool. The young man dodged in time, sliding his feet along the ground. This fight, which promised to be so fierce, now turned into something less and began to resemble more a friendly duel. The youth thought that, as expected of the 5th level of the meridian expansion stage, he still couldn't withstand such pressure. A couple of abrasions that were left by this great master's strike were reflected on his face. Xie jumped up from his seat, finally gathering his strength and standing up. He began to protest and asked Elder Zhao not to kill this fool. He wanted to personally tear him to pieces to calm the hatred in his heart. This youth was a disciple of the demonic sect, and so his elder listened to him with ease. Elder Zhao's eyes narrowed. The man smiled and told his disciple not to worry, since he himself would not kill this youth. While the two were talking, Lin Bei turned to his magical beast and threw it into the air. Goldie immediately began flapping his wings to avoid falling to the ground. The youth said that it was his turn now. When Elder Zhao finally agreed with his disciple, he noticed a strange movement in the sky. The man was surprised that this fool had his own magical animal. He could not understand how this man had restored all his strength in a month and took possession of a magical animal. The man was confused and even seemed a little scared. His eyes widened and his eyebrows shot up. The elder of the demonic sect cursed under his breath and tried to quickly do something, but it was too late to do anything. A moment later, he was struck by a beam of yellow light. The man remained standing there, unable to do anything. He suddenly realized that the hour of his death had most likely come. The demon sect leader mumbled something under the knife about how this person simply couldn't be so lucky to possess a 4-star demonic beast. There was a gaping hole in the sealed demon sect elder's chest and blood was pouring out of his mouth. Those words in the 4-star magical beast were the last thing this man could say in his life. The next second he fell lifelessly to the ground. The leader of the emerging cloud sect and his daughter who was supposed to get married today were watching all of this. The head of the outgoing cloud sect fell to his knees and didn't know what to do. He said something about it being the end and it was all over. At that very second the man realized that Lin Bei had a 4-star demonic beast. The 4-star demonic beast was a weapon that could cause even the greatest warrior cultivators to fall. Despite the tragic situation they were in, the daughter of the emerging cloud sect leader still couldn't believe that Elder Zhao had died. While the girl couldn't believe it, Elder Zhao's former disciple fell to the ground again and said loudly that his teacher had died. The man also couldn't believe it, as there were many rumors about the power of the demon sect leader. And while the man was sitting on the floor trying to collect his thoughts and accept the fact that his teacher was no longer alive, someone approached him from behind. Someone's hand reached straight to his shoulder. Then that hand moved to his neck and a few seconds later it lifted him into the air. It was none other than Lin Bei's hand. The expelled disciple lifted Xie Fei off the ground and asked him what he had said. The youth clearly remembered how a few seconds ago that man had threatened to tear him to pieces. The man said that if Lin Bei had killed the elder of the sealed demon temple, then he could not kill him yet. When the young man asked a very reasonable question about why he could not kill this man, the answer was that he had already carried the visit to the temple and had become a core disciple, and the head of the temple was very favorable to him. The man also added that what's more, 4 of his brothers had entered a top-ranked school. Xie Fei promised Lin Bei that if he let him go right now, he would forget about this incident. The youth knew that what the man said made sense. Hearing the attacker's words that the man was speaking the truth, a drop of hope was reflected in his eyes again. The demonic sect disciple asked to be released quickly and again promised never to persecute the exiled disciple. This idea seemed like a failure from the start, but something went wrong. Lin Bei and really let the poor guy go. The man fell to the ground, although he had already mentally said goodbye to his life. But of course all his words were empty farce. And after escaping death, the man immediately thought that as soon as he returned to the Temple of Sealed Demons, the temple master would definitely seize Lin Bei and take revenge for his disgrace today. And the young man seemed to have read his thoughts. He got closer to his victim and asked about whether Xie Fei was still delirious about how when he returned to the temple the head of the temple would avenge his disgrace today. The man immediately tried to whiten his honor and said that he had not even thought about such a thing. As soon as the man stood up, the youth spoke again. Lin Bei said that the youth in front of him was so stupid. Since this man's father had taken away all of Lin Bei's talents, Xie Fei should have known very well that the exiled disciple would not let him go so easily. After these words, the man immediately felt a blow to his chest. Blood began to flow out of his mouth in streams, and then he began to cough up blood. It seemed that death had overtaken him at such an inopportune moment. His body lay there lifeless. That day Lin Bei had already killed 2 people. One of those people was Elder Zhao and the other was his most loyal disciple. Both of those people had caused Lin Bei a lot of suffering and now they were paying for it. Seeing this expelled disciple just kill 2 people, everyone fell to their knees and bowed their heads before him. Everyone present just wanted to live. None of them were going to give up their lives today despite all the sins they were dragging along from their past. When everyone bowed their heads, the leader of the emerging cloud sect on the contrary raised his eyes to the sky. He repeated the same phrase. The man said that everything had come to an end. In fact, he would not mind dying now. This entire empire that he had built for so long was beginning to crumble before his eyes. And this was worse than death. Lin Bei noticed his former teacher's strange behavior and walked up to him. He looked angrily at the man's face and asked what kind of concern he was having when he knew what he was getting into from the start. Initially, he knew nothing. He could not imagine that the exiled student would rise from the dead and miraculously regain his talents. He also could not imagine that the wedding of his only daughter would be cut short like this. The old man began to cry and said that he had raised this ungrateful disciple for so many years. The man begged to let him go, saying that he was willing to spend the rest of his life in seclusion in the mountains only if Lin Bei would spare him now. But Lin Bei didn't care about these words. He didn't care at all about how his former teacher felt now. The young man asked him to tell him what he had done and perhaps he would have spared his life. The old man rejoiced and asked if it was true. Now these unreliable words were his only thread to freedom, to a happy life. The exiled disciple was not a fool, so he answered that his words were certainly true. The head of the outgoing cloud sect suddenly thought about what was so special about the reputation of cultivation. As long as he could keep his life, everything could start over. An even more sincere hope shone in his eyes. The man cried out that they had agreed on this. The old man rose from his knees, turned to face everyone present, and shouted that the disaster that had happened in the emerging cloud sect was his doing. He spoke quite sincerely, so everyone should believe him now. Tears welled up in the eyes of this old man. He really looked like a man who was on the verge of life and death. Actually, like all the people present here. This man was clutching at the last thread to save his life, and now he was ready to truly repent of everything. He said that in his quest to reach the top, he had no hesitation in putting his personal disciple in a difficult position. No, that was not it. He had literally set him up. His only daughter became angry when she heard these words. She knew perfectly well that her father was talking about her too. The girl seemed to have predicted her father's next words. Immediately after that, he said that his daughter Mo in mystery had poisoned Lin Bei and sealed his cultivation. Everyone present was in silent shock. The man decided that if he had to repent, he would drag all those who were accomplices in this matter down with him. Throwing around words about how after Lin Bei was overthrown, Xia Pingqiu had taken over his talents. The invited guests were still in shock from such a fascinating and tragic story. One of them pointed a finger at the elder of the outgoing cloud sect and shouted that he never expected that Mo Lingyun would be such a treacherous and vile person. All the cultivators began to hurriedly leave the place where the wedding ceremony was to take place. One of them also shouted out that fortunately for the leader of the emerging cloud sect, he had always considered him a close friend. Another added that he could not understand how he could be so wrong about a person. This was how the head of the emerging cloud sect lost the trust of the entire cultivator world. All those plans he had made for the future were now crumbling before his eyes. But he didn't care much. Even without a future, he was promised that his life would be saved. The cultivators hurriedly flew away somewhere into the sky. They used their movement techniques to leave this place as quickly as possible. None of them could have expected that the leader of the exiting cloud sect would simply betray his best disciple. Lin Bei thought that all these people were afraid of getting involved with him, which was why they ran away so quickly. In fact, there was some truth in his thoughts. The cultivators were indeed afraid of the top disciple of the outgoing cloud sect after he had strangely resurrected from the dead. The bride looked at the newly arrived expelled student with an expression of fear in her eyes and on her face. The girl did not understand why on her wedding day that man decided to appear in her life again. Lin Bei addressed the girl by name and said that he would be frank with her. Then the young man said that she had greatly disappointed him. And these words made the girl lower her gaze. And a slight tremor ran through her body. Outsect immediately spoke to the young man. He said that he had done everything that Lin Bei had asked. This man, even at such a moment, continued to think only of himself and not of his daughter, who could presumably die at the hands of this master. The young man turned around and looked at his former leader. He pointed his index finger at him and asked, does he really think that the expelled disciple would now leave his former teacher alive? The daughter of the leader of the outgoing cloud sect suddenly raised her head, as she did not expect Lin Bei to betray his own words. The girl's father fell to the floor, so I could no longer hold him back from the overwhelming fear that had come over this man. Mo Lingyun looked at his former student and said that he was not keeping his word. But what could this man even say about keeping his word when he personally sentenced Lin Bei to certain death a month ago? The one who was at fault here and did not keep his word was himself. The elder of the cloud emerging sect. The man immediately got what he deserved for his words. His former student's blow landed right in his chest. Lin Bei looked at the teacher who had betrayed him and thought that it was unfair to be unfair to people, but killing a creature like him while leaving his body untouched was the greatest mercy and justice. The leader of the emerging cloud sect lay lifeless on the cold floor. His daughter watched everything and the unfolding picture and did not know what to do in this situation. The girl became even more horrified and began to call her father, but he did not respond. At the moment when another appeal to her father came out of her mouth, Lin Bei walked up to the girl. The young man said that now it was her turn to pay for her sins. From top to bottom, he felt like he was in control of the entire situation now. Even though Mo Ying had just lost her father and felt helpless, she still found the strength to raise her head, smile, and shout that it was all their fault. It seemed like this girl was repenting right now. There was a hint of madness in her voice. The girl continued to laugh, saying that if she had been Lin Bei back then, she probably wouldn't have been able to live to see this day. Hearing such words coming out of the girl's mouth on the verge of life and death, the young man couldn't help but be surprised. His eyebrows shot up. And the bride who had lost her temper would not shut up. She said that even if the expelled disciple executed everyone present here, he himself would not live long. Hearing these words, Lin Bei became even more furious. The girl continued to say that Lin Bei would not be able to advance further in this world if he killed her fiancé. According to her, he would not only have to face the sealed demon temple, but he would also be pursued by all the higher powers. The girl continued to laugh as she spoke. She completely lost her temper. The girl laughed, but tears continued to flow from her eyes. She called the expelled disciple by name and said that she would wait for him in hell. Mo Ying knew that this was the end for her. A few seconds later, the girl fell backwards. It seemed like she was no longer breathing. Lin Bei hadn't done anything to her, so her death wasn't his doing. Although, if you think about it, he really wanted to kill this girl himself. The young man exhaled, watching the girl's body fall to the floor. Now he stood completely alone. He was surrounded by the 4 corpses of the people who had done the most harm to him in his life. If he had the chance to take revenge on the whole world, he was ready to go to the very prince. Of course, Lin Bei understood that his further path would not be easy. After the words of the deceased bride, he thought about it even more. But the young man was ready for this. From the very beginning, having agreed to destroy everyone who had harmed him, Lin Bei perfectly understood all the conditions and shortcomings of such a deal. Now he stood surrounded by 4 lifeless bodies with tears still drenched in their eyes. He quietly said that the adversity he would encounter on his way would only harden him. The young man was completely confident in himself and was ready to move into his future. He looked somewhere ahead and tried to gather his thoughts and strength. Recently, after this battle, he had been overcome by such a strange feeling, as if he had done everything that was required of him in this world. Now he had taken revenge on all those whom he hated so much. Lin Bei was born to stand at the top of this world. And he knew it very well. The young master's magical beast covered its mouth with its hand. This little bird was about to die laughing right now. He couldn't imagine how a boy at the Meridian expansion stage dared to talk so brazenly about the whole world. Although if you look closely, this person didn't look like someone who would just throw around empty words. Goldie thought that he should just see how far Lin Bei could go. That same evening, there were few people in the Temple of Sealed Demons. This temple stood on the peak of one of the mountains on one of the scorched wastelands. That's why it was called the Temple of Sealed Demons. There was absolutely nothing alive around here. Only mountain peak stones and rocks. There was a sage sitting in the temple. This man is the problem of the Sealed Demon sect. The sage burst into laughter as soon as the man who suddenly appeared told him about the situation at the wedding. The voice of this strange man, who was several times larger than an ordinary person in size, was quite caustic and unpleasant. He asked Sect Master Xie to sit down in front of him. The sect master quickly refused such a proposal, saying that he would just stand there. It seemed that this adult man was scared and considered himself feeble and insignificant in the eyes of this person. In fact, this was the case. The person who sat on the throne in the Sealed Demon Temple was none other than Celestial Master Tu. Celestial Master said that Sect Master Xie was too talkative. He also added that as long as Xie Fei honored him in the temple, they were family. With these words, the Celestial Master once again invited the Sect Master to sit down in front of him. If he were to accept such an offer now, it would not be considered disrespectful to Celestial Master Tu. Sect Master Xie finally decided to sit down after the second sentence. He was about to start a dialogue with Heavenly Master Tu when an informer suddenly burst into the temple. He said that he had an urgent report. The Celestial Master invited him in, and the informer immediately ran towards him. The man's face was hidden under a hood, and he also wore a mask. In principle, this form was generally accepted in this temple. All the servants here hid their faces. When the informer P approached the Heavenly Master and told him his news, the Heavenly Master immediately became furious and in a menacing voice asked Sect Master Xie to wait a moment. It seemed that this person was very unhappy about something. The Sect Master, who had almost sat down on the floor, looked sharply at the Heavenly Master. The Heavenly Master said that they had very bad news. Now, if the Heavenly Master himself said that some news was important, then it meant that something equal in strength to the end of the world had happened. Hearing the words of the Celestial Master, Sect Master Xie was at a loss. He asked what had happened. The man wanted to quickly get an answer to his question right here and now, so his calm expression disappeared without a trace. Heavenly Master Tu said that Lin Bei from the outgoing cloud had returned. This man quoted the informer's words, saying that he had gone to the sect and executed Mo Lingyun and Mo Ying. It all sounded quite scary. It only meant one thing: things would soon turn upside down. Sect Master Xie couldn't believe that this exiled disciple was still alive. In his mind, it was simply impossible. He himself saw his body being thrown off the cliff. He himself took everything from him in his 5 elements. So how could that man kill 4 people so easily? Heavenly Master Tu also said that not only that the son of the Xie sect Master Xie was also dead. The man who sat on the throne of this temple clearly did not like the fact that he had just lost the elder of the sealed demon temple. Some of the disciples and servants burst into fits of laughter, realizing that the sealed demon temple elder was not that strong. The father of the deceased did not understand how this was even possible. This man knew very well that Elder Zhao was at the 5th level of the Meridian expansion stage, so how could he die at the hands of this exiled disciple? The man sitting on the throne said that it seemed that Lin Bei had a big secret. The man doubted his subordinate's words and asked again if the sect master was hiding anything from the demon cult. If Xie Pingqiu lied now, his head would immediately fly off. The man understood all the risks perfectly well, so I will answer honestly that he is not hiding anything. From the very beginning, he dedicated the demonic sect to all the details of his actions, and therefore he simply had nothing to hide. Master activated his hidden ability and looked straight into the eyes of the man sitting in front of him. The Heavenly Master's eyes turned bright red. This meant only one thing. He was currently testing this man to see if he was lying to him. Using his own lie detector, which was several times stronger than any potions or other devices, Grandmaster Tu smiled and turned to Elder Zhao. If this man's face showed any good emotions, it meant that he no longer doubted Xie Pingqiu. The elder immediately responded. The temple master told her that this Lin Bei deserved to die for killing his disciple elder. He asked to bring him here. Now the temple master of the sealed demons himself began to hunt Lin Bei. The girl smiled wickedly. Her eyes sparkled with malicious sparks. She completely obeyed the order of this man who sat on the throne. If this girl started hunting, Lin Bei's days seemed to be numbered. Heavenly Master Tu said that he was very sorry to lose the style of the vast purgatory. He said this with such a smile as if it was not his disciple who had just died at the hands of the seemingly miraculously resurrected exiled disciple of the cloud exiting sect. The man who was the father of the deceased thought that he and Lin Bei were now bitter enemies. In fact, it had been like that before. But now this man was going to declare a hunt on Lin Bei. While the Temple of Sealed Demons was in the midst of a heated discussion about how to best get even with Lin Bei, the boy they were discussing was simply strolling down the street. He was talking to his magical animal, saying that all the treasures of the heavens and earths that the old dog Lin Yun had stolen now belonged to him. The youth also said it was surprising that there were only 2 3-star demon cores among them. But it was better than nothing. Once the youth processed them, he would be able to break through to the 3rd level of the Meridian expansion stage. Bei's magical beast looked at all this from the side. Goldie thought that this insignificant piece of trash was a treasure to him. He remembered how in the heavenly palace countless treasures, spiritual weapons and magical weapons of all kinds were arranged in the rooms. But now he had become a simple magical beast. Now he felt that he missed money very much when he could lie on the highest level amethysts, white jade beds and absorb the best elixirs. Lin Bei looked with gratitude at the impossibly beautiful bird painted in golden colors nature itself awarded such an unusual color. The dark-haired man's eyes showed pride in the work done. A bright yellow pill rolled out of the young guy's hand towards the parrot. The gray-haired one kept saying that it had helped him quite well. The parrot had an ambiguous reaction to the round pill. He only glanced at the object with disgust when the thought flashed through his mind, the lower class of the yellow level, even dogs don't eat that. The dark background with bright flashes of light created a dramatic effect. The colorful parrot with yellow feathers, a red shirt and black pants was clearly confused by what Lin Bei was suggesting. The bird's expression is one of anger and fury. Its large dark eyes are wide open, its brows are furrowed, and its beak is tense. The bird's skin is orange in color, and there are red spots around its eyes, perhaps from contemplating the pill. Having finally lost his temper at the gray-haired man's impudence give the majestic bird something that even dogs don't eat, he still agreed that it was better than nothing. At the same time, Lin Bei's face was as if he was going to say how good he was, but he only thought that the parrot looked very cute. Having waited until the bird swallowed the pill, the gray-haired man quickly grabbed the parrot in his hand and rushed away, saying only one word, "Let's go." Lin Bei is surrounded by majestic mountains covered with dense vegetation. Tall trees break through the rocks and green moss and lichens can be seen on the ground. The atmosphere of mystery is created by the fog that envelopes the peaks of the skyscraper-like mountains and the soft, diffused light. The guy calmly descends the stone steps leading down the steep mountain path. The young man had that same fiery-colored parrot on his shoulder. His head was in a mess, and he began to reason about the gray-haired man's actions, that if he were going for revenge, he would have killed everyone, not to mention the sect members. Flowers, dogs, cats, he would have killed everyone. He would have even shaken an egg yolk to death. Having finished his reasoning, he concluded that the boy was too soft-hearted. He let people go and even left the sect. How could that be? Isn't revenge a dish best served cold? A powerful explosion occurs behind the man, enveloping him in a bright orange flame. The explosion is accompanied by many sparks and dust particles, which creates a sense of dynamics and power. The shape of the explosion resembles an opening flower. Just when the parrot thought that Lin Bei was too soft, his guess was immediately dispelled. The boy's eyes were filled with madness, but he only smiled evilly when he heard a powerful explosion behind him. It seemed that the chick was not surprised by much in the gray-haired boy's actions, and only with a heavy sigh did he realize how cunning this boy was. They continued to descend down the steps of the steep slope, and the silence of the mountain forest was now broken by the sound of fire. Less than half a month had passed before Lin Bei was already at the border of eastern Xinjiang, riding on a menacing coal-black ox, and behind him were visible people carrying sacks of supplies. The poor ox had a very tired expression from the unbearable heat in the desert. His face looked as if he was about to lie down right there among the sand, and nothing else will worry him in this life. There was absolutely nothing around except sand and red mountains with sand. Laughing nervously, the old man looked for a reason to start a conversation with the gray-haired man. Turning to him, he said that their group was getting stronger. Clutching his head, the young man quickly agreed, while thinking that it was very unexpected that Lin Bei himself had fled in the company of ordinary commoners. Bei's face clearly showed that he was shocked by such statements. The second reason was to support the old people and take care of the children. While the gray-haired man was already sitting on the bull, the old man who told him to become the head of the village was already talking to some grandmother. She only said that they would be a burden to them, but the old man nervously laughed and said that of course not, they have a wonderful new head. With a heavy sigh and looking into the distance, Lin Bei said that alas, such a large number of people showed how miserable the people of eastern Xinjiang were under the oppression of the outgoing Cloud sect. Heading forward, the gray-haired man said that once they crossed the desert they would reach the southern Xinjiang. And that when they get there, let them all settle down and find a home for themselves. The old man looked at Lin Bei and said, "Chief," as he asked, "there are about 120 young people on the road with them ready for training." And that they told everyone about the body-cleansing technique of the green bull. The gray-haired man in turn replied, "Well, although this is the simplest body-cleansing technique, it is enough to reach the first level of the enlightenment stage. And this is already a step into martial arts." The gray-haired old man with long hair was serious, drawing the protagonist's attention to the fact that he should see that they have a lot of people. He should really think about founding a sect in the South Xinjiang. This really made Lin Bei think hard. He held his head with his fist, thinking about the old man's suggestion. Maybe this really was a good idea. A winding blue river that crosses the desert. Its bright color contrasts sharply with the surrounding yellow sand, creating a sense of life in the middle of the lifeless desert. Rocks and stones of various sizes are scattered on both sides of the river. Some of them are covered with moss or lichen, indicating the presence of moisture. In the background, high cliffs and mountains are visible, giving the landscape depth. Despite the arid climate, trees and bushes grow in some places in the desert. Their green foliage creates a pleasant contrast with the yellow sand. A muscular guy with a high ponytail and a deep scar on his face said that according to the denunciation, Lin Bei must definitely pass through here. At the same time, he laughed evilly and continued that when the time came they would simply grab him and take him to the Temple of Sealed Demons. Leaning on a small rock, the mysterious guy wearing a hat said that it would be a good day, brothers. Behind the guy were other people in similar clothes who were also talking to each other. The beautiful girl with violet eyes like rubies that shimmered in the sunlight just giggled. She also had ash-blonde hair and dark lips seemingly painted with cherry-colored lipstick. The old man pointed his finger somewhere into the distance and addressed Lin Bei as a master, saying that there was a crescent moon spring ahead and that he could rest there in peace. Confused, the gray-haired man was surprised at how quickly the old man renamed him a master, but trying not to show it, he agreed that they would make a stop there. The guy with the high ponytail asked, "What's the matter? Why are there so many people with Lin Bei?" From a distance, it really looked impressive. After all, there were about 120 people following the new leader. The guy in the hat was also worried and put forward his own guess. Did he take the entire sect of the emerging cloud? To which the ashared girl called him off as a dumb dog, answering that he should take a closer look. With him are the old, the cross-eyed, the lame, and the sick. And a couple of ordinary youths. Nothing to worry about. They continued to look out for the gray-haired man who was riding the bull as if nothing had happened. The old man with long hair was still hanging around nearby, and behind them were people who were carrying supplies in the form of water and food. Bei's face clearly showed anger and self-confidence. What a pity that they were just a bunch of worthless dogs. The foot is shod in dark shoes with golden elements. The muscles of the foot are tense, which speaks of Lin Bei's strength and dynamics. A small cloud of dust raised by the same foot rises upward. The gray-haired man was completely confident in his own strength. He would definitely not be afraid of the enemy. After assuring the old man with words that he would go and sort things out, Lin Bei confidently stepped forward. The old man called him master again, asking him to be careful. At this time, the little bird that was still traveling with the young man seemed to wake up from a deep sleep, sensing that a fierce battle was approaching. The muscular man pointed his black mace at Lin Bei and said to him that he was not interested in the open door to heaven, since he had decided to cut a window to hell. However, such threats did not bother the beautiful and excellent young man. The guy with the scar on his face kept shouting from the top of the cliff that Lin Bei deserved to die for insulting the sealed demon temple, so let him accept it. From afar, he was not at all threatening, and the gray-haired guy who stood at the bottom of the cliff calmly listened to the threats directed at him. Bei's face showed confidence in his words and actions. He gestured with his hand to come closer while simultaneously saying words for him to attack. The boys from the temple rushed down the steep cliff, one after another, their eyes filled with madness and killing intent. One of them began to say encouraging words, "Forward, brothers, wealth and prosperity are right in front of them." To which the gray-haired man clearly didn't care that a bunch of evil people were rushing towards him. Raising his fist, he only sighed sadly, looking at this whole picture. A bright golden energy circle is visible around the fist, giving the impression that the character is about to deliver a powerful blow. The effect is enhanced by the dynamic lines emanating from the fist and the dark background, which contrasts with the bright elements of the battle. Lin Bei, dressed in bright clothes, is at the epicenter of a powerful explosion. Debris is flying around him, and he himself, judging by the expression on his face, is focused and ready to fight. Also, bright flashes of light and flying debris create the effect of a powerful explosion. Bei's brutal blow sent everyone plummeting down. Some were already unconscious, while others were just beginning to kiss the ground with their faces. Debris and stones flew around the people of their temple, and dust rose up. An unearthly beautiful girl with ash-blonde hair lay with her eyes closed, and next to her was another young guy from the temple. The girl was wearing a red cape, and the girl herself seemed to have fallen painfully. But then the ashared girl opened one eye. Apparently she was pretending to have lost consciousness, so that she would not be touched anymore, namely, so that she would receive fewer blows from the gray-haired one who was in full swing. Bei's attack. The old man said to that master, "There were countless enemies on the way who wanted to grab you, but no one could withstand your attack." To which the young man throatily replied that they were just a handful of fools who cling to the strongest. Lin Bei continued his thought that he was more interested in why no one from the Sealed Demon Temple or the Heavenly Mercy sect had come for him during all this time. To which the old man began to deny that it was not important. "Let's go to the oasis and find ourselves in the southern Xinjiang, don't worry too much." The main character's face showed doubts about what had happened, but he decided not to show it and agreed with the old man. After all, he was now the new headman, and he needed to keep an eye on the people who followed him. Turning his head to the old man, he gave the order to make a halt for now, and then they would go to the city as quickly as possible. The old man confidently agreed. And those people who tried to attack the gray-haired man were cruelly tied up, and their mouths were stuffed with something so that they could not speak and complain. It even became a bit pitiful for them, but the fact that they were hostile towards Lin Bei gave him every right to treat them like that. At the top of a high mountain is the lonely figure of the gray-haired Lin Bei sitting on a rock on the edge of a cliff. Apparently he is meditating. A guy with long dark hair dressed in purple clothes. His posture is calm and focused despite what is happening around him. But something tormented the thoughts of the main character. After everything that happened, he really thought about founding a sect, but would it be a good idea? Is it worth doing at all? A young man sits cross-legged with his back to a dense forest. His long hair flutters in the wind and his clothes are dark, rich colors. The pose expresses calm and concentration. A dark forest stretches around the rock. The sky is filled with thick clouds and stars, creating an atmosphere of mystery and night silence. Suddenly Lin Bei felt a sharp approach to him. He did not expect such a development of events. After all, they tied up all the enemies, and the people who followed him were below. Then who is it, and what does he want from the main character? The girl with the dark red cape and ash-blonde hair put a knife to the gray-haired man's back. With complete confidence in her actions, she said coldly that she advised him not to move. The cunning girl, like a fox, smiled maliciously, saying that this boy certainly has no sense of self-preservation. Lin Bei was completely confused and asked, "Who are you?" Brushing one strand of hair away from her face with her gentle hand, the girl decided to answer the question and introduce herself. She was the elder of the sealed demon temple Zhao. The girl assured the protagonist that she knew that an incredibly strong monster was walking with him, but she asked him to keep in mind that her blade was at his back. If he tried to do anything, she would kill him in an instant. The gray-haired youth tried to be reasonable and not to say too much. After all, his life was at stake. He said that if she wanted to kill him, he would not be breathing. "What is your true goal?" Then, asking the second question, he said, "You didn't come to talk to me, did you?" The ashared girl had a terrifying aura. It was clear that she was hostile. Noticing what a smart guy she was, she said that everything was simple. She needed his strength. To which the gray-haired man smiled and asked, "Will you take her without permission? Aren't you afraid that the Temple of Sealed Demons will take revenge?" To which the girl replied that I will have their revenge if I pay the heavenly body of the primordial chaos. There was still a dense forest around the two of them. The girl continued her thought that he really was a pervert. He developed 5 talents, and when they were all taken away, he awakened another one. To this, the protagonist had an expression on his face as if he was the brightest star here. In the end, he answered her, "Meet this is what a genius looks like." The girl's expression continued to shine with a sly smile, and from her eyes, which looked like purple rubies, a strange but scarlet-colored liquid flowed. It was probably blood. The girl has pale skin, large, wide-open eyes with bright red pupils which give her an ominous appearance. Dark circles or shadows are visible around her eyes, enhancing the expression of anger or suffering. Starting to cast a powerful spell in her hand, with under her cloak one could see a toothy and terrible mouth, and a long tongue was sticking out from there. A hand enveloped in a bright, pulsating red light. Also a palm, the fingers of which are slightly spread, giving the impression of readiness for action. The skin on the hand is covered with fine veins that glow in unison with the surrounding light, emphasizing the power and energy emanating from it. The lips are bright red, creating harmony with the tongue. They are parted in an expressive grimace, perhaps expressing pleasure or even a challenge. Apparently this is part of the spell. An open mouth like a bottomless abyss, ready to swallow everything in its path. Fangs long and sharp like daggers stick out of it in different directions. Their roots going deep into the jaws testify to the incredible power of this spell and the girl herself. Bei's power with her hand, she was clearly confident in her powers and the spell. Bei's gaze was directed backwards. His face was filled with rage and determination. His eyebrows were furrowed, his lips were parted to reveal his teeth. His eyes were wide open and full of determination. His hair was dark and disheveled, with a few strands sticking up, highlighting his emotional state. He furiously shouted that it was a pity that she was the one sent. Bright flashes of light and energy creating the impression of powerful force and speed. The lines coming from the protagonist's hands resemble blades. From such a force, the girl jumped to the side away from the explosion. Of blue and purple predominate, emphasizing the icy theme. The contrast between the dark background and the bright elements of the character creates the effect of a fierce battle. The girl barely managed to stand on her 2 feet and not fall from such force. The Ashared Elder was completely astonished by Lin Bei's strength. She was confused when she said that he was actually a 4th-level Meridian expansion stage, and in her mind she only wondered what kind of monster he was. She had trained for more than 30 years and had only reached the 6th level. And this kid in such a short time. A dark nighttime background with elements of the starry sky. The protagonist's hair flutters in the wind, making him look more menacing than he already is. Lin Bei walks towards the girl while only a cloud of dust can be seen behind him. The gray-haired man's eyes were full of rage at the girl. He decided to repeat once again what he had said, that he was a genius. And indeed, people like him achieve unimaginable heights. The girl's hair was fluttering in the wind. She was frightened by this situation apparently. She did not expect that Lin Bei would be so strong that he could get rid of her spell. In an instant, the girl in the dark red cloak turned away from the gray-haired man. The only thought that flashed through her mind was that she had miscalculated and needed to run away as far as possible. The chick was clearly unhappy that some sounds had woken him up. The golden bird was fast asleep while Lin Bei was sorting things out with the Ashared girl. There was quite a bit of rage in his eyes. While the girl was retreating, a parrot appeared in front of her, somewhat reminiscent of a phoenix because it was glowing brightly like a flame of fire. It flew straight at the poor girl who wanted to escape. The girl's face showed no small amount of horror at what was happening. She mentioned this terribly strong monster that was with Lin Bei, but she didn't expect to meet him here. She only managed to say one word: wait. The fire enveloped her body. The girl's flesh began to burn mercilessly. It seemed that she died a rather painful death. The fire looked so strong that it could burn everything in its path. The parrot was simply furious at this development of events after he had reduced to ashes the beautiful girl in the cloak, leaving only her shoes, and flew back to his sleeping place. Having flown back to his cherished place where he sleeps, he continued to be indignant that he was woken up because of such a trifle. Damn it, it is not worth disturbing him over such insignificant trifles. Bei had just recently sat and meditated. A tall flame of fire burst forth, and the residents did not know how to react to it at all. The old man quickly ran up to the gray-haired man, asking the question that interested him. Turning to him again, the head, what happened? The people in the background were also waiting for an answer. The already calm Lin Bei, as if nothing had happened, as if it wasn't he who had fought with the elder of the Zhao Sealed Demon Temple a few minutes ago. Qin. He said that it was all a trifle and not worth worrying about. He ordered everyone to pack their things and that they would be moving out. The old man seemed pleased with such an answer from the new young leader and agreed. Everyone else who was also waiting for an answer understood the command and went to get ready. Finally, Lin Bei and the others arrived in Chingshu, the territory of the southern Xinjiang. They were met by a large city filled with residents, at least that's what they thought. The old man laughed loudly, stroking his beard with his hand, saying that they had finally arrived, but the gray-haired man did not share his joy and asked what seemed to be wrong. The former elder saw people leaving the city carrying some kind of supplies and things on their backs. It was really strange for such a good city. Turning to one such commoner, the old man asked a leading question, addressing him as a brother. It seems many are leaving the city in a hurry. What is the matter? Behind them, the forests and mountains that these 120 people had passed through together with Lin Bei were visible. This indicated that they had come a long way. To which the commoner clarified, "You are from far away?" "Yes," to which the old man agreed. People continued to leave the city in a hurry, and the townsman who spoke to the former elder said that they had come to the wrong place and advised them to leave as quickly as possible. The old man was confused and asked what had happened in the city. Starting his story, he said that recently bandits came to Xinjiang and started burning, stealing, and killing. Hell broke out. The townsman continued to tell that these bandits executed the chief as soon as they entered the city. All the people were in a panic, afraid that their turn would come. He had horror on his face while the guy was remembering all this. Lin Bei, sitting on the bull, asked what stage their leader was in cultivation and what level were the bandits. The guy replied that their lord was at the 2nd level of the Meridian expansion stage, but he was defeated in no time. Apparently their leader had reached at least the 4th level of the Meridian expansion stage. Already heading further on the road, the commoner again advised to leave here quickly. The old man tried to put forward some idea of his own what they should do. The gray-haired man was completely confident in his words. He told the old man that if he was only at the 4th level of the Meridian expansion stage, there was nothing to worry about. He also said that we were going to the city to take a look at these bandits. In a beautiful city with its own great and long history, people were leaving the gates of the walls. Little children were crying and adults were trying not to panic too much about what was happening. And Lin Bei was just thinking to himself that Chingshu was actually quite a big city. It would be nice to take it under his control and make it his fortress. That would make the gray-haired man's life much easier. High on a certain throne sat the figure of a solid man. In front of him stood several subordinates, and this situation took place in the Lord's mansion. Within the city of Chingshu, the young man's face was confused. The guy with brown hair tied in a high ponytail with blue eyes asked in confusion, "What does it mean that the townspeople are running in panic?" The muscular bald man began to justify himself to his master, telling the chief that wherever you look there are only ignoramuses. Their leader has no conscience, they administer justice, and they look at them as if they were evil spirits. This really infuriates him. The girl with a bandage over one eye closed the other, and then tiredly put her head under her hand. Her hair lay neatly over her shoulder, and the girl herself barely audibly muttered the word God. But when another man entered the building and shouted loudly to the chief that a group of people had arrived in the city, everyone immediately perked up. The girl stood up from her throne and looked at the open doors. The girl stood arrogantly above the rest of the people in the room. She loudly asked if the man was telling the truth. The man with the bob smiled and said that it was absolutely true. When the chief asked where they were, he answered that they were in the inn. The warlike girl with blue heavenly eyes smiled brightly and even playfully, and then the same girl with a black headband and a high ponytail stretched out her hand to them. She narrowed her beautiful eyes and ordered to quickly take her to them. After only a few moments, another building was visible in front of them. There were a few people walking around it, but the house was truly magnificent. Various wooden carvings, stairs, balconies, and a patterned roof. And he approached Lin Bei. He advised the young master that he should leave as soon as possible. After all, Chingshu was not the best place to stay for a long time. While drinking tea, the young man replied that there was nothing to worry about. Then he asked for some food, and the man immediately turned around and walked away from the table where the village elder, his granddaughter, and the unshakable young man were sitting. The elderly servant said that everything would be as he said. Horses were racing at breakneck speed along the busy streets of the city right on the asphalt. Their hooves or a small part of their mane were burning. One of the passers-by turned around abruptly. At the same moment he froze in place from fear, not knowing what to say. It seemed that even a cold sweat appeared. He opened his eyes wide and then said that they were robbers. The reedied man in the inn heard this announcement almost immediately. He squinted and quietly muttered that they had shown up quickly. The sergeant and the girl in pink looked at the guy who was about to leave and heading for the exit. He exhaled tiredly, closed his eyes, and said that everything was fine. A horse with a fiery mane and flames instead of hooves stood near the inn. The most majestic horse was ridden by the same warlike girl with the eye patch. The others were riding ordinary horses behind her. Lin Bei slowly approached the bandits. The fire was reflected in the girl's heavenly eyes. She smiled slightly as she looked at the boy in front of her, and then asked if this was where he was looking for shelter. The reedied man nodded immediately and smiled back at the girl. He said that it was right here. There was a sleeping bird on the guy's collar. A few moments later, the girl was able to jump off her horse without burning her red outfit with black sleeves. Even her long hair didn't catch fire. The guy looked at her in surprise. The girl immediately ran closer to Lin Bei and pulled him towards her, hugging him. She cried out pitifully that this guy was a very good person. The girl tried to portray real tears and pity for him. The entire band of bandits who were behind her didn't even know what to say. Some decided to just close their eyes, others along with her burned with shame, insisting that they didn't really know each other. But the man was immediately removed from the girl. He blushed slightly, but looking at the robber with a tired look said that if she had something to say then she should cook more gently. The girl immediately tried to clear her throat in response, hoping that the atmosphere around her would stop being so awkward even for a moment. But then the lady came up to the guy and grabbed his hand. Then she led him to the inn, saying that this was not a suitable place for conversation and therefore they should go inside. Behind the girl stood two more bandits. They were sitting at the same table opposite each other. The lady extended her hand to him, saying that since they were refugees, she offered them to stay in Chingshu. The lady almost sparkled and dazzled with her snow-white smile. She closed her eyes and clapped her hands, saying that in that case her people would take care of their resettlement. The reedied man, having heard the lady's answer, decided to cautiously ask if the girl was afraid that he might turn out to be a bad person. The girl with the sky-blue eyes jumped up from her seat, almost screaming that if she was able to capture the city, then she would definitely have enough strength to defend it. But the boy only forced a sarcastic smile. After a few moments, he asked what would happen if he said that he had insulted the temple of sealed demons. The two bandits behind her, their eyes wide with emotion, stared at their boss's interlocutor. They almost exclaimed a question about what he had done. The girl asked again if the guy was serious and if he had really insulted the temple of sealed demons. But Lin Bei, spreading his arms out to the side with a slight grin, calmly responded with the words that he had killed their best student as well as the local elder. The lady slammed her fist on the table. The lady was frantically looking for a way out of the situation. She should have kept her emotions under control, but fear was clearly visible on her face, especially in her blue eyes. She said that the Temple of Sealed Demons was located in eastern Xinjiang, and they were in southern Xinjiang. Their paws could not reach them, and besides she could still handle it. But leaning closer to the lady, Lin Bei asked more quietly, looking at her slyly, what would happen if the sects of the Scorching Sun, Inexhaustible Swords, Countercurrent, and also Heavenly Power joined them? The bandit didn't know what to do with herself anymore. It seemed as if she was already sweating coldly. The lady said that the Scorching Sun and Heavenly Power sects were in northern Xinjiang and the Inexhaustible Swords and Counterfire sects were in western Xinjiang. She laughed awkwardly, reminding them that they were still in southern Xinjiang. Still, the boy stood up from the table and leaned against the wooden curtain that was supposed to hide them. Lin Bei smiled and then said that he hadn't expected the bandits to be so brave. The lady remained silent, but then the man's gaze changed in an instant. From relaxed it turned into stern and tired. Lin looked at what was happening in front of him. It was as if lightning had passed him. All three robbers lay on the floor unconscious, and without badges they were all frozen in a certain strange pose, exhaling the air that remained in their lungs. Looking at this picture, the guy decided to shake his hands against each other and then wearily said that he thought that this robber was brave. One of the servants decided to go into their room. But before him appeared a curious picture, as only one young man out of 4 boys still stood on his 2 legs and was conscious. The old man decided to ask the chief what was going on here. He was very worried and even scared. Lin Bei stopped the old man, making a sign with his palm, and then said that these people had fainted from fear. The boy asked to find people to carry them away, and they would send them to the local lord's house. The old man immediately agreed. The robbers came to their senses already tied up. Most of them looked beaten. Someone had a bloody nose, another had a swollen eye. Lin Bei walked proudly through the streets of the town. Behind him were the tied-up bandits and the happy civilians. The guy smirked slightly when he glanced at what was happening behind him. One of the couples who went out to see why there was such a crowd were clearly surprised by such an unexpected event. The man said that he thought they were ordinary refugees, but look at what they were doing. The girl responded in fear that this Chingshu was too dangerous, they needed to run away and quickly. Somewhere else a plump woman sat on a throne. She had huge rings in her ears and almost her entire head was covered in gray hair. Her lips were painted with black lipstick and her eyeliner was neat. She was wearing a yellow robe. She said that Elder Zhao was dead and there was nothing left of Zhao, not even bones. She asked if there was anything to tell anyone. Not far from her, also on the throne, sat a small child with greasy hair pulled back into a ponytail. He had pink eyes. Exhaling heavily, the child said that Tench Bei must have more strength than they thought, otherwise Elder Zhao wouldn't have disappeared. The child turned to the woman and said that while he was settled in the south, they should intervene. However, the 4 Borders tournament was about to take place. The old woman smiled kindly like a sweet granny. She said that it was true and it would start very soon, but they had lost the body of the immense purgatory. Although in other sects there were still children with heavenly talents. The girl decided to put her hand with a black manicure on her knee covered by a yellow robe, and then the woman stood up from the throne. From his robe came out various pieces of clothing. They all seemed to float next to her. The girl said that before that Lin Bei should be discussed again. She ordered to start training the disciples. They still need to participate in the Four Borders competition. The full girl smiled brightly and kindly. She stood up from her throne and waved her hand at the silhouettes that stood on either side of her. Squinting her eyes, she ordered them to move away. The space around the woman immediately began to change. A bright fire lit up in the places where the servants had stood. It was like magic because it appeared out of nowhere and went into nowhere. The woman's robe flaps rose high up right above her head. And then the girl's eyes opened. But there was nothing human about them. There was no longer a pupil or white color. They shimmered with black or red lines, as if the woman was under hypnosis. But moments later she suddenly leaned closer to the ground. Her facial skin wrinkled, and then the woman bared her teeth, showing sharp fangs. The woman's eyes glowed bright red and magic rose from her hands. She screamed that everyone was annoying her and what was the point of keeping them at all. They couldn't even bring poor Lin Bei from the squalid sect. And after a few moments there was nothing human left of her. Her eyes now resembled burning Sonon red buttons. She reminded herself of the Four Borders tournament and then said that she would tear them all apart. Elsewhere in the hall of the Heavenly Mercy sect everything was much calmer. At least that was how it looked from the outside of the building. There was not a soul around the huge house. Only the blue clear and high sky was watching it. Xia Pingqiu sat on the throne. He tiredly rested his head on his hand and in a thoughtful voice asked the servant if all the letters had been sent out. The man nodded in response and said that they had been sent out to all four young masters. The man with purple eyes covered one eye with his hand and said that it was very good because he would eat this Lin Bei alive for the death of his son. But then he thoughtfully replied that in principle it was not so bad because he still had 4 children left. Still, the servant with blue eyes looked at the master with eyes full of hope and fear. He said that the answer had already arrived and the patriarch had better read it personally. The boy carefully took the letters out of the inside pocket of his vest. The man carefully handed over 2 neatly sealed letters to his master. Xia Pingqiu immediately accepted them with interest. After opening them and reading the contents, the man began to tremble violently with fear. His violet eyes kept sliding over the lines of paper. He squeezed the letters in his hands even tighter, but moments later the man collapsed coughing up blood. All the papers immediately turned bloody and flew out of Xia Pingqiu's hands. The servant ran up to the master. The letter was an appeal to his father saying that the Four Borders tournament was coming and he should devote himself to cultivation in order to expand the sect's capabilities. And one day they would be able to avenge his brother's death. Elsewhere everything was happening no less calmly. Before the eyes of a certain man everything was big. He still couldn't come to his senses. Before his eyes lay the familiar trembling body of the robber. And next to him another one. The man closed his eyes, quietly laughing at his own stupidity. Opening her eyes once more, there were 2 robbers in front of the girl familiar to her. The largest one was just trying to get up from the cold floor while the second one was trying to stay on his feet. The girl suddenly stood up from the floor. She grabbed him with one hand and her head, which still hurt, with the other. Her heavenly eyes were full of fear. Sitting on the cold floor, she thoughtfully said that she most likely had a nightmare. In front of the girl stood her 2 bandits. They looked at the girl with fear and barely audibly at the same time asked a rhetorical question: what did they do? But then the girl turned away from the 2 stupid guys and decided to look around the room they were all in. The girl with the bandage began to turn her head from side to side, fearfully looking around the room they were all in. The bandits around her were either sitting on the floor like her or were barely standing on their feet. Exhaling heavily, the lady with the bandage patted her chest and exhaled heavily in relief. She said that this dream was too scary. As if someone could insult all the powerful sects at once. The biggest of them said that they remembered exactly the same. Someone thoughtfully rubbed their chin from such news. Someone smiled like a fool and others thought. A terrible realization came to the girl. Her mouth opened wide and cold sweat began to flow from her eyes. Her eyes were wide open and her pupils were narrowed with fear. The very first one to react after the girl was the tallest man who had only rubbed her chin before, and then they all had the same reaction. The other man nearly screamed in horror, his eyes wide. The third bandit clenched his jaw. He couldn't move for a few moments from fear. Cold sweat slowly dripped down his face. The fourth man's face twisted at first in a grimace of incomprehension, but then his eyes widened in horror of understanding. The fifth robber was quite emotional. He had a long mustache, frowned, and almost started shouting curses. But suddenly another man came to them. He loudly noticed that they had already woken up. The girl with lightning-fast reaction turned to the unexpected guest. All the robbers were on guard. Lin Bei quickly and proudly walked past the girl who couldn't even find the strength to get up from the floor. Her eyes widened in fear when she recognized the guest, and she was even afraid to look him in the eye. Sitting on the throne, the eyes of the man with the bird lit up with a red fire. The man towering over all the robbers said that since fate itself had brought them together, now they would follow him. But then he asked if there were any other opinions on this matter. The girl thought for a moment and then smiled tenderly. Cold sweat was still running down her face. She clenched her palms and narrowed her eyes, wondering if the bandits had the option of simply leaving. The guy with red eyes smiled slyly, looking at the girl in front of him. He said that such an option really exists. All the bandits immediately ran to the exit. Their trembling bodies barely obeyed them. Someone looked at Lin Bei in fear, but he only said that the bandits could lie down and leave. The girl with the sky-blue eyes looked back at the refugee awkwardly and even fearfully. She clasped her hands and asked if this was being discussed. Lin Bei gave her a stern warning look. He frowned and then said that it was not up for discussion. The girl closed her eyes in despair and took a deep breath. The emotions that overwhelmed her made her want to cry. She wondered why she was so unlucky that she had to deal with such horror. Lin Bei smiled slyly and then leaned closer to the bandits. He said that this was his first time at the southern border, so he ordered them to report the situation here. The lady sighed quietly and began to talk about the southern border. But the girl was interrupted by another servant. He suddenly burst into the huge room, shouting that things were bad for them. The silhouette was not visible at all, but all the offended bandits looked back at the shouts. Lin Bei frowned even more. His red eyes were even darkened by the shadows. He asked what happened. Grandpa informed the master that a man had arrived and claimed to be a messenger from the Temple of the Two Beginnings and asked Lin Bei to come out to him. It was obvious that the old man was worried about the young man. Cold sweat was even running down his face. Lin Bei asked again about the Temple of the Two Principles. The robber immediately replied that it was the most powerful sect in the southern Xinjiang. Although they are weaker than the sealed demon temples, they should not be underestimated. The guy rubbing his chin shook his head, and then Lin Bei suddenly squeezed the chick on his chest. Gold was very surprised and opened her beak along with her eyes waking up from sleep. Lin Bei turned to the little bird, worriedly asking if he could sense the enemy's cultivation level and if he could defeat him. The little bird was still perplexed and in the man's tightly clasped hands. The little bird thought that he was a measly third-level meridian expansion stage, and Lin Bei was tugging at him for nothing again. A moment later, the little bird decided to slap his master with its wing. The man leaned back on the throne in pain. Lin Bei slowly and hesitantly rubbed his removed cheek. It turned red all over, and the man himself smiled awkwardly and said that it seemed like the little bird could defeat him. However, he still held the gold piece in his hand. But a moment later, the guy changed again. He looked at the old man in front of him sternly and with obvious menace. Frowning and clenching his teeth, he asked to tell the guest that if necessary he should go to Lin Bei personally. Otherwise he could leave. The servant immediately bowed, clasping his palms. He closed his eyes and said that he would do it. All the men in the room looked at Lin Bei with puzzled expressions. They frowned and looked at him as if he was a fool, not even knowing what to say or object to. Girl with heavenly eyes and in a red suit, she crossed her arms over her chest and looked at the old man who was already leaving their building, heading towards the representative of the sect. The lady could only think that now it became clear to her how this young man had insulted so many sections. He was completely crazy. Outside the Lord's mansion, the sect's envoy was being carried. He was sitting in a wooden carriage carried by about 10 people, and another 10 were walking behind him. He was flanked by 2 men in special clothing. A long-haired man sat in the carriage. He was wearing a snow-white robe and a dark gray vest. This man was Jiang Feizhua, the chief disciple of the Temple of the Two Beginnings. When addressed, he thoughtfully pulled down the curtain from the window. The man looked haughtily at one man in a special different from all robe. He awkwardly closed his eyes and said that this Chingshu is on the outskirts of the southern border. He is small and pitiful and his warriors are weak. The servant asked why the young master needed him. The man with bright turquoise eyes smiled wickedly. He said softly that the Four Borders tournament did not just evaluate the best students, it was the heritage of their lands. The young master turned away but cast a sly glance at the servant saying that usually the more cannon fodder the better. Someone has to die. The servant smiled awkwardly and said that the young master was wise. And then Jiang grinned evilly. He said that he heard that Chingshu had a new leader, so there should be plenty of cannon fodder. As soon as they arrived and announced the tournament, the new lord would immediately bend over and kiss the young master's feet for the opportunity to show off. The servant immediately concluded de Milo. He clenched his hands and closing his eyes said that everything was as expected from the young master. After all, such resourcefulness makes one admire him to the depths of the soul. The man on the other side of the carriage looked quite stern. He was wearing a black robe. He looked around at the people and asked why Lord Chingshu had not yet shown up. Jiang waved his hand casually. A wicked smile never left his lips. He said that he was sure that after hearing about the Temple of Two Beginnings they began to prepare a worthy reception, and therefore they should wait a little longer. The carriage had no front wall at all, so the only thing that closed Jiang off from the outside world was a large translucent curtain. The two servants next to him behaved completely differently. The one in white was still laughing awkwardly, covering his mouth with his hand, and the other was looking ahead warily. A silhouette was visible in front of them. A man was running straight towards them from a large building behind him. That silhouette was a young bandit with celestial eyes. She stood hesitantly in front of Jiang and his servants. Her hands were shaking and it seemed as if cold sweat was pouring off her. She pressed her lips together. Just a few minutes earlier the same girl looked at Lin Bei with an offended expression, arms crossed on his chest. The impudent young man stood up from the throne and decided to stop the old man after all. He turned around in surprise. The man pointed his finger at the robber saying that he thought for a moment and decided that she should go to the unexpected guests from the sect. The lady was very scared and dumbfounded. At that moment the girl froze in place, unable to even move. It seemed as if she had been turned into stone, and that was precisely why she could not move. But at this moment the lady on the contrary was trembling with fear as she looked at the men from the sect in front of her. She looked at everyone trying to concentrate on her task. The man in black immediately approached the frightened woman opposite. He exclaimed that the young gentleman was right and someone had indeed come. And then the servant cautiously asked the lady, leaving a distance of several meters between them, whether she was the head of Chingshu and why she did not bow before the young master of the Temple of Two Principles. The woman tried to look at him with the same gaze, but her eyebrows were furrowed, her eyes still looked scared. The lady with a trembling voice said that she was not the head of Chingshu at all. Jiang exclaimed in displeasure that this was presumptuous. After all, he had been honored to personally come to the city, and only an envoy had come to him. The servant in white robes never stopped smiling brightly. He awkwardly noted that, in such remote cities, people might not be familiar with etiquette. And so he suggested that they pass since it was time for the young master to rest. But the man with turquoise eyes at first completely ignored his servant. His eyes flashed unkindly and he nodded almost imperceptibly. The servant in white immediately blocked the young master's passage with his hand and ordered the girl to lead them. The robber tried to convey to them in a trembling voice what the Lord had said. The girl looked at them, even more frightened in heavenly moments. At such moments they resembled a starry sky strewn with stars. The lady added that if they wanted to see him, then let them come in person. The lady began to chew her own lips from nerves nipping them. The girl tried to voice what would happen if they did not come. But moments later, gathering all her strength, the lady almost shouted that otherwise they should go away. She closed her eyes, afraid to look into Jiang Feijua's eyes. The man only frowned. He looked at the messenger in front of him with bewilderment and mockery, and then a blow of purple power passed through the place where the girl stood. It was fire, and the blow from it spread to the nearest places like an earthquake. But the bandit managed to delay it, and therefore she was not affected. Jiang shouted that their lord was impudent. The girl tried to turn away from such a dangerous guest. Looking at Jiang with apprehension, the lady said that she had conveyed all the words of the leader, and then asking for forgiveness said that it was time for her to go. Jiang Feijua said that the lady would need to go with him. The two servants immediately looked at their young master with interest. The man with turquoise eyes frowned. He said sternly that he wanted to see how capable the local lord was. The young man rose haughtily from his carriage, and then followed the girl, followed only by his two loyal servants. Entering the building, the girl turned to Lin Bei and said that she had conveyed his words. The lady pressed both hands to her chest. A young man with red eyes and long hair sat lazily on the throne. He leaned back against the back and placed his hands on his stomach. Lin Bei told the bandit that this was very good. Finally entered the building, a huge hall. He raised his chin proudly, walking closer to Lord Chingshu. Lin Bei thought that this was just a piece of trash at the second level of the Meridian expansion stage. The man with turquoise eyes smiled slyly. He sighed heavily and introduced himself, saying that he was the master of the Temple of Two Beginnings, Jian Feijua. The man walked closer to Lin Bei and asked if the young man on the throne was the Lord of Chingshu. But the reedy boy didn't strain himself at all. He scratched his ear and didn't even think to look at the trash under his feet. Jiang raised his index finger at the young man on the throne and asked what kind of arrogance this was. The young master ordered him to come down to where he was standing and talk to him. Then Lin Bei was stunned. He opened his eyes wide, looking at the insignificant boy below him. He asked if the young master deserved this. Then the young master lost his temper because of Lin Bei's dismissive answer. He shouted that Lord Chingshu was truly a madman. He asked if he knew what the Temple of Two Beginnings was. After all, he could destroy his entire town with just a wave of his hand. A moment later, the young man with the chick on his chest sternly glanced at him with red eyes. He tensed up, put his hand on his knee. Lin Bei said that he could risk trying. Jiang Feijua's face twisted into a grimace of disgust. He closed his eyes, trying to console himself with the thought that he should act more calmly. After all, it was clear at a glance that this was just an ordinary peasant, and Lin Bei had no idea how powerful the Temple of Two Principles was. The young gentleman exhaled heavily, realizing that he needed to remember his goal for the first time. Opening his eyes, the young man looked quite calm. He raised a lecturing finger up, addressing Lord Chingshu. The young master enthusiastically said that he had come to bestow the greatest opportunity. The Four Borders tournament was about to begin. A man is allowed in Lin Bei City. Bring warriors to their temple to participate in the competition. The reedy boy opened his eyes wide. They were clearly filled with excitement. He asked again about the Four Borders tournament. Jiang Feijua spread his arms out to the sides, smiling wickedly, and then replied that if Lord Chingshu's warriors distinguished themselves, they would be able to achieve unprecedented heights. Lin Bei almost immediately said that he would participate in this tournament. He rested his head on his hand again. The young master said that this was very good, and he believed that the Lord was aware of the current bodies. But the Lord interrupted the young man. He said that he would not represent their Temple of the Two Beginnings, but the Temple of Chingshu. Jiang clearly did not expect such an answer from the lord of a small town. He was very surprised, not even knowing what to say. Lin Bei looked at the man below him with a smile on his lips. He asked if the young master thought that the lord would become cannon fodder for the other side. The servant in white pointed his finger at the lord. Magic began to appear around him. Bright red fire surrounded the servant, moving after his hands. The man shouted that this was unheard of impudence. After all, his young master, a virtuous man, had personally come to give them the greatest opportunity, and they were being impudent in response. The servant said that they had no shame at all. The servant in black robes crossed his arms over his chest. He looked sternly at the man in front of him. A bright fire was circling around him in the same way. It wrapped around the servant's entire body. The same one asked the young master to kill the lord because he was too impudent. The young master no longer wanted to hide his anger and disgust towards the lord. He looked sternly at Lin Bei and then said that since the boy was so eager for death, Jiang would grant it to the lord. 2 fireballs appeared from the young man's hands. They were long and fast, and therefore, in a matter of moments, they were already far from the young master. The two servants who had been standing on either side of the young master also charged into battle, saying that it was time for the Lord to die. Bright flames swirled around their bodies. But Lin Bei looked at them with boredom. But when their magic got too close to the reedy boy, he decided to just lazily raise his hand. The golden ornaments on his hands immediately began to shine. The two servants instantly flew to the other end of the hall. There was no trace left of their talents. They struck Lin Bei with all the force of their blows, crashed into the wall. Jiang Feizhou turned around in surprise, looking at his loyal servants. Lin Bei looked at Jiang mockingly. He smiled broadly, asking if he wanted to help him and kill him at the same time. The man waved his hand. The young master turned to his opponent. Jiang looked at him sternly and then said that he had managed to conquer Chingshu and he really had some ability. So young, but he had already reached the second stage of meridian expansion. Lin Bei was quite worthy of the master's helping hand. And then the man stamped his foot a couple of times. Purple patterns formed on the floor with his feet, and there were snow-white convolutions on them. It resembled a dance of smoke. But after a few moments, Jiang stood on the image of Yin-Yang, and next to him was a circle of purple magic. It towered, creating impassable walls. The girl found herself in the walls of the young master. He said that his palace Liang-Yi had the best formations. Another circle appeared on top of the man with turquoise eyes. He crossed his arms behind his back and said that this formation was called the Yin-Yang of heaven and earth. Jiang smiled slyly and insidiously. He informed Lin Bei that even if a third-level meridian expansion stage expert was caught, he would be locked in this formation, unable to move. Then the young master walked towards Lord Chingshu on the throne. He smiled like a madman. His polite tone of voice changed. He said that he would not kill Lin Bei right away. After all, he would first break every bone in his body. The young master wanted him to bear responsibility for his insults. But Lin Bei only let out a tired sigh as he looked at the threatening young man in front of him. He rose abruptly from the throne, leaning on its armrests. The man thoughtfully asked whether Jiang was mocking him or not. The boy with turquoise eyes was stunned. He opened his own eyes wide in bewilderment, incomprehension of how this could be. Jiang raised his index finger at him, loudly asking how the Lord could even move. Lin Bei was slightly surprised by the young master's violent reaction. Jiang's magic approached the Lord's feet. Purple light enveloped all of his shoes. Lord Chingshu said that there was one simple way to break the formation, but after a few moments there was no trace of magic left. Lin Bei's magic was able to drive away all the talents of the young master in a second. Now only lines of fire emanated from the reedy guy. He smiled weakly but contentedly. Jiang smiled again as if he was mad. His eyes lit up and turned red, but he smiled widely, showing his snow-white teeth. He called Lin Bei a good guy because he was good at creating a formation. He admitted that he underestimated the enemy, but in that case they would find out about it now. Suddenly Jiang's physique began to change. It became stronger with each passing second. More muscles grew on his body, abs, and the man himself grew in height. At the same time, the guy did not stop smiling and clenched his fists. The man ran towards his opponent with inhuman speed. It seemed as if lightning was even coming from Jiang. He said that the Lord had the honor of dying at the hands of the master assassin with 7 bodies. Towards Lin Bei, they were exact copies of the young master, only with more muscular bodies. They all smiled brightly as they surrounded Lord Chingshu and were about to kill him. But Lin Bei didn't seem to be tense at all. On the contrary, he smiled slyly, and then his red eyes lit up with mad excitement. The man kicked one of Jiang's spears hard in the head. The other one was stunned for a moment and staggered back. He pushed his head down to the floor, pressing his shoe right into his skull. He almost screamed in pain as he fell to the floor. The stone floor began to break under him. Lin Bei did not stop smiling for a second. He looked at his opponent with a haughty gaze and asked if the young master wanted to tear him into pieces with such a small ability. Jiang was lying deeper than the shards that were scattered on the floor. The man was trying to catch his breath. He looked up at Lin Bei and then said that he admitted his defeat and was leaving here immediately. He told the reedied man to act as if he had never been here. The impudent man asked if he wanted him to just let him go when the young master came to him with evil intentions. But the man whose body was literally pressed deep into the floor, so that he lay in the ground under the buildings, looked at his opponent with fear. He replied that of course not. After all, he was asking for forgiveness for his sins. He handed over an engraved ring to Lord Chingshu. Jiang asked Lin Bei to take it because it contained a large amount of spiritual stones and it would be at the disposal of the Lord. Lin Bei looked at the defeated guy very strangely. He looked at him with bewilderment while slowly laughing, and after Lin Bei, he finally reached for the ring that Jiang had so vehemently offered. The man smiled crookedly again and looked at the reedied boy. He laughed to himself, wondering if the impudent fellow really thought he had 7 bodies hidden away. And then the guy opened his mouth wide. A bright white ball was visible in his jaw, and the guy himself was glowing with a red scarlet light. Jiang's face twisted greatly. A wave of red light emanated from the man's mouth, and on top of it was a snow-white lattice. The silhouette that had previously belonged to Lin Bei immediately darkened and then began to crumble. The man smiled broadly. He proudly said, shouting to the whole hall, that he, the young master of the Temple of Two Beginnings Jiang Feizhua, had no equal among his peers in resourcefulness and self-improvement. Jiang said that Lin Bei had fallen into his trap and was about to die. But at that moment the entire trap that the young master had set up began to dissolve. Lord Chingshu mockingly asked if he had said anything. Jiang suddenly raised his head, looking at his opponent with frightened eyes. His eyes narrowed to incredible sizes and his mouth opened wide. Lin Bei looked at him with an angry look. He turned to Feizhou, saying that he did not plan to kill him, but he asked for it. The reedy guy said not to blame him for this. After that trap, the boys had no clothes left. The lady, who had been watching the men trying to kill each other all this time, looked at Lin Bei with embarrassment. She thought that he had a good figure, ignoring the corpse of Jian lying nearby. The man told the girl to come to him. The robber was surprised. Her cheeks betrayed her embarrassment, but she also smiled brightly. Lin Bei said, towering over the bandit, that she needed to bring him clean clothes and also tidy up the hall. The chick was now sitting on his shoulder. The bandit immediately leaned closer to the stairs, saying that she obeyed the order. After a while, the sullen man was sitting in clean clothes. The chick was hiding again on his chest, falling asleep. Then the man leaned back in his throne and looked at his hands. He said that they needed to continue talking about what was happening in the south. The bandit stood before him. She clasped her hands and replied that southern Xinjiang was the most restless of the 4 major territories. And then the girl smiled, wondering if she had hit her head. She hadn't told anyone what she knew and what she didn't. The lady thoughtfully rubbed her chin. And then she said that there were more advanced forces in those territories than in the other 3 territories combined. Lin Bei looked at the girl's silhouette sternly. He thought that it was no wonder what was going on with the hips there. After all, there was no dominant force there, but there were a bunch of sects cultivating together. And then the frowning guy asked the lady to tell him everything about Liangyi Palace. The girl crossed her arms and replied that Liangyi was home to thousands of disciples and about 10 elders. In terms of numbers and sect level, they were not very strong. But no sect could provoke them because of the developed formations and easily sanitized lands around Liangyi Castle. Waving his hand and shaking his head, the man asked the girl to go to the most powerful sects on the southern borders. The girl placed her palm on her fist and bowed, saying that there are 5 strongest sects living in the south. They all have the potential to surpass other sections. All the warriors of Xinjiang say that once the disciples of the 5 sects grow up, they will definitely surpass all the sects in the south and become a force comparable to the Temple of Sealed Demons. The sects were absolutely incomparable and dissimilar. Among them there was the Vajara sect, famous for its martial arts, the Divine Beast sect with the power to control beasts, the powerful Yin-Yang controlling fire and water, the strongest, the Divine Lightning Palace controlling the power of lightning. Perhaps this sect will be able to compare with the Sealed Demon Temple the fastest. The girl, who had all that information in her head, shook her head and closed her eyes. She only said that in addition to those 5 sects, there were 20 more worthy sects that were at the same level. The man asked wearily if it was because all the young disciples of these sects were strong or if they had geniuses. The lady sighed heavily, saying that of course there were geniuses. Lin Bei asked whether these geniuses themselves were able to awaken their heavenly talent. The lady was very surprised by this question and opened her eyes wide in amazement. The girl almost shouted out the words that among the 5 major sects there was only one disciple with an earth-level body. Even so, these sects were dedicated to cultivation. She opened her sky-blue eyes wide. Lin Bei put his head on his hand and said that they would probably protect this genius to death, and then laughed slightly. The man added that he was afraid that he would have to face him. The man only exhaled heavily again after a moment. The man wearily asked to tell him in as much detail as possible about this tournament of the 4 borders. The girl looked at him in bewilderment, scratching the back of her head. She asked about whether the Lord really didn't even know about this. The man leaned back on his throne and closed his eyes. He answered the lady saying that he had dedicated his life to a small sect and had heard of this tournament, but he did not know the details. The girl was very angry at the man in front of her. She thought about how a small sect could create a monster like him. The girl immediately decided that it was obvious that he just wanted to test her, that she thought that she couldn't be fooled at all. But in fact, the bandit just raised her finger instructively and smiled softly. She replied that the 4 Borders tournament is the main event of the 4 major regions. After all, it not only decides the distribution of resources across these territories, but also determines the future of each sect and each warrior. The lady smiled brightly and clenched her fist. She said that all sects participate in the tournament regardless of their size and strength. If a lord reaches the end and enters the top 10, he can obtain the treasures of the 4 regions distributed by place. The bandit said that if Lin Bei could enter the top for these 4 sects, would be able to gain the support of the founder of the hidden world. He was a sweet grandpa who extended a helping hand to the strongest sections. The lady added that the most outstanding disciples would be able to enter this hidden world to gain experience, improve their level, and find the path to immortality. At that moment, the chick decided to cough. Water almost flowed from his beak. He heard the conversation of 2 people and thought about the path to immortality. Indeed, it seems that he is not afraid of anything looking at their life. What to say about immortality if at least he managed to touch a particle of it, and that would already be wonderful. The little Goldie started to bite the man's shirt. He tried to wave his hand to stop the little bird. Lin Bei annoyedly told the girl to continue. The chick, who had already been squeezed on the cheek and left a small wound there, tried to cover his face with his wings. He thought that his whole face was swollen. But fortunately, in this form of a bird, he need not fear injury. The lady smiled awkwardly and kindly offered to tell him about the 4 Borders tournament. The girl waved her hand decisively. Her expression immediately changed. It became stern and faceless. The lady said that the 4 Boundaries tournament is the inner meaning of the sect. This is the warrior of the sect. This is more than the wisdom and courage of the sect. The girl raised her gaze up instructively and looked at Lin Bei with a menacing gaze. She said that the tournament is divided into 7 rounds. The first round is the Hunling Forest test. Only the sect that passes this test can advance to the next round. The man moved closer to the girl and asked what the Hunling Forest was. The bandit replied that Hunling Forest is a place where 4 territories intersect. It is very strange. For example, there may be a beast with thick blue fur and paws with snake skin. It is said that it belongs to someone from the hidden world. Hunling Forest is filled with disasters, and by passing through it one can prove that one is worthy of the test in the tournament. Can be said that this is the initial stage of selection. The lady with blue eyes bowed her head and said that accordingly the number of people here is decisive. There was once a case when the head of the sect accidentally died. The man smiled brightly as he looked at the bandit. He said that the Temple of 2 Beginnings wanted them to join and simply become their cannon fodder. The girl put her hand to her chest, decisively saying that after passing through the Hunling Forest, the round of battles would begin. The bandit said that each sect must send 11 disciples to participate in the competition, and only the winning side can advance to the next round, and so on until the top 10 sects are selected. After the top 10 sects are selected, there will be a final battle to determine their ranking. The principle is simple. It can be explained even by simply drawing. The man's eyes widened in surprise, but the awkward smile was still strong on his face. He asked the lady again if they really needed to send 11 students to participate and if they had enough people. The girl began to scratch her neck awkwardly. She smiled brightly, saying that if luck was on her side, perhaps she would be able to pass the Hunling Forest trial. Lin Bei rubbed his chin thoughtfully as he stared at his little bird. He looked at it in surprise and then asked a question about how birds were not considered human. The girl froze in place, not knowing what to answer to such stupidity from a man. But then Lin Bei smiled slyly and asked what would happen if he could defeat 11 people on his own. The girl stared at the Lord in fear. She awkwardly asked again. The lady was very surprised by such a proposal even from this boy. But then the bandit understood. Her eyes narrowed sharply, and the girl herself almost screamed a question about whether Lin Bei would really represent the sect alone. The man clenched his fists. Magic swirled around him. It was either lightning or blue rags of his talents. He smiled wryly, saying that he was Lin Bei and he really wanted to test. Clenching his fists even tighter, the man finished his sentence by asking if he could enter the top of this world. The boy's red eyes lit up with a strange excitement again. The girl looked at the guy very strangely, at the same time with admiration and as if he were a fool. She looked at him in surprise. In her thoughts, only his words about the top of the world were spinning. Lin Bei suddenly casually called out to the girl, looking at her with a menacing gaze. Girl, with her heavenly eyes, she emerged from the trap of her thoughts. She opened her heavenly eyes wide and stared at the man. The reedied man exhaled heavily and then rolled his eyes. He told her not to stare too much and then asked how much time was left until this tournament. The girl blushed slightly at this remark, but then said that they still had about 7 months. It would take a month to get from Chingshu to Hunling Forest, so they had another 7 months to train. Lin Bei began to rub his chin tiredly. He thoughtfully said that the lady was talking about 7 months, and then briskly said that this was quite enough. He ordered the lady to tell in a similar way about the current state of the city. Describe the population, the number of warriors, the city's available resources, and so on. The girl turned her eyes away from the guy, offended, and replied that their Chingshu had turned into a devastated shell of lies. There were no more than 1,000 people in the city, and there were almost no warriors except for those he had brought. As for the city's resources, not to mention food for training, there wasn't enough even for the daily maintenance of the same 1,000 people. The man let out a disappointed sigh, saying that Chingshu was much poorer than he had originally thought. The robber bowed her head, closed her eyes, and said that no one cared about this town, and besides, the robbers had scared many away. So now everything is hard. The man smiled mockingly and clenched his fist. He said that the robber woman knew that everyone had run away because of her. The girl's eyes lit up with an idea that had suddenly come to her mind. She said sharply that she had one way. The girl raised her finger instructively, and the man told her to speak. The girl took out a huge piece of paper which was covered in writing and even rolled up. The lady smiled brightly as she pointed at it. She told the leader to look at it because although the lands of Chingshu are not fertile, there are bandit camps in the surrounding mountains consisting of many warriors. And although these camps are not rich, they are even better than their Chingshu. The guy asked if the girl was hinting at a robbery. The man's eyes lit up as if bright stars were shining in them. The girl closed her eyes. These stars reached even her. The lady shook her head positively. Lin Bei said that he was a noble man who wandered between God and earth. How could he do something like robbing? It was as if the guy himself was turning away from his own light, even closing his eyes so as not to see it at all. The lady instantly felt uncomfortable and awkward. She fixed her hair and smiled innocently, saying that she hadn't thought about it at all. After a few seconds of thought and bewilderment, the girl suggested that in that case they could borrow money. Hearing the girl's voice behind him, he turned around and then asked her to tell him where they would be staying. The girl replied that the closest bandit camp to Chingshu was the northwestern Black Bear camp. They would go there. The journey would take no more than 5 days. The leader of the Black Bear camp was at the second level of the Pulsation expansion stage, and he had more than a dozen subordinates under his command. The man came down from the throne and walked out of the hall. He said that the matter was urgent. He said that the girl needed to call the headman and he would sort out the matter and they would set off immediately. The girl bowed and immediately agreed. The only thing that was bright in the night sky was the moon. It had long since replaced the sun, illuminating places on Earth. For example, the Black Bear's camp. In front of the exit there was a small wooden gate, and also a small wooden thing with large spikes and a wooden board on which was an image of a black bear. Many men were sitting around the burning fire. One of them held a piece of meat in one hand and a glass in the other. He raised his glass and told his brothers that they had a rich harvest this year. This year was the most successful for the Black Bear Camp. The boy in the back raised his glass and said, "Long live the Black Bear Camp." One of the servants approached the man who had spoken about the harvest. He called him chief and bowing his head said that someone was waiting for him at the gate. The chief asked from which mountains those brothers were. The servant with purple eyes awkwardly scratched the back of his head and said that these were people from Chingshu and they wanted to borrow money. The 6 men who were sitting around the fire with their food looked thoughtfully at the 7th servant with rather unexpected news. He pointed his thumb at himself. He was a man of about 40 years old with a beard and gray hair tied in a ponytail. He asked if they had really come to him from Chingshu and also to borrow money. The leader said that it was hilarious because he probably didn't know that they, the Black Bear Camp, were bandits. He had come to borrow money from bandits. Suddenly 2 more figures appeared at the side of the boys. One boy said that he was very touched because he was so happy when he found out that he was going to borrow from him. Apparently today's trip will definitely be fertile. The leader was very surprised and looked at the young man. The man's eyes widened and he asked how he had even managed to get in there. The reedy guy grinned his eyes wide. He said that they had such a low palisade around them it was like walking on level ground. The girl with a bandage over one eye cast an uncertain glance at the robbers. One of those with whom they were making a fire leaned over to the head and whispered in his ear that he knew this woman because it was she who had recently settled scores with the city of Chingshu. The second man smiled disgustingly, looking her over. He said that although she was quite ugly, how could one refuse a woman who came straight into one's hands? The bandit asked what the hell he was talking nonsense about. She could have torn his tongue out for such dirty words. The man smiled, looking lustfully at her body. He said that he liked her disposition. He asked her to wait because first he would use her and then she would go through the hands of his brothers from all over the camp. Lin Bei did not expect this. The girl immediately rushed to the man. The men who were sitting opposite immediately smiled. They began to argue about who would be the first of them. The young man raised his hand, smiled softly, and then said that this girl was with him and they were insulting her right in front of him. He asked if this was okay. The boy suggested that they apologize first and then lend them some gold and then they would part ways. Lin Bei asked how they felt about this. The head of the house had a nasty smile on his face for a moment. He asked what the handsome guy was counting on. Did he really want to play her protector? Lin Bei looked around their camp with pity. He let out a heavy, disappointed sigh and then asked if they were taking him lightly because he was too kind. He scratched his hair awkwardly. The man clenched his fists and looked at them with determination, his scarlet eyes. He said that he wanted to talk calmly, but since it was pointless he would have to fight. All the men immediately jumped up from their seats. They shouted taunts about the fact that they could watch this handsome man fight. Several fists of men from the camp had already tried to hit him and swung their fists to harm him, and then the girl. The boy opened his eyes mockingly, looking at all the hands reaching out to him. He laughed, saying that this was all childish fun. The guy didn't even have to move. With the help of his 6th talent, he was able to throw all those who tried to harm him high up. The blue rays made it so that they were thrown into the fire. All 3 bodies of men lay next to the fire. They had escaped unscathed after all. But the leader was not at all beaten but quite whole. He picked up a huge iron bat with spikes. The leader grinned and then said that the handsome man dared to hide such abilities, but now he would personally teach him a lesson. The man tried to hit the boy on the head with this very bat, saying that the handsome guy would get it. He opened his eyes in fear. His veins were showing. Bei's head that broke, but the bat. A huge crack formed in it, making it completely unusable. It seemed as if even the headman's pupils had turned red. Cold sweat was almost running down his face. He asked rhetorical questions about how this could have happened to his equipment. The man looked at the bat with hope and admiration. He mockingly asked why such a wonderful weapon had shattered into pieces because it was such a huge tragedy. And then Lin Bei pressed him. He grabbed him roughly by the jaw, almost twisting it. The leader immediately bulged his eyes, saying that he had lost this time. He asked to spare him and he would give everything that the Black Bear Camp had. The boy's hand immediately left the bandit's face. Lin Bei said that he even liked how arrogant he was at first. He ordered him to hurry up and order the people to bring everything. The frightened leader turned his gaze to his opponent's palm and immediately agreed with his words. The robber shouted over his shoulder to the servant asking if he was still not coming. The boy with purple eyes looked at the two men, was brought to Lin Bei on a plate. It even glowed. The guy asked incredulously if that was all and whether they hadn't even hidden anything. All this time the man was sitting on the back of the leader who was lying on the sharp rocks. He said that they would not dare to do such a thing. Lin Bei looked at him with apprehension. The man then decided to leave the Black Bear's camp. He said that in that case everything was fine and they would go. They had a good place here, there was potential. The chief was just trying to get up. The boy and girl were about to leave the camp. Lin Bei said that he hoped that they would continue to develop, and when the opportunity arose he would visit them again. The bandits stared at the boy in surprise. When the leader was sure that they had left, the man immediately shouted that he had never been humiliated like this before. Let the people send word, gather the brothers, he said that he would destroy the city of Chingshu. The man knelt down, unable to rise. The eye-patch girl asked her leader why they didn't just destroy the Black Bear camp, since Lin Bei was clearly not a kind person. The long-haired man smiled and said that he was still kind. The man looked at the lady and said that he would ask her what they would do if he left them alive. The robber immediately replied that they would definitely take revenge. They would gather all their people and definitely attack Chingshu. The robber said that the attack required a lot of effort, and if they waited for the Black Bear to make the first move, their work would be easier. The stars in her eyes lit up again. The man smiled brightly and replied that the girl was promising. But there was one caveat: they had borrowed money. The man raised his finger instructively. In the city of Chingshu, in the same main building, the sun was shining brightly. The high sky illuminated the entire space. There was not a single gray cloud in the sky. The reedied man sat on the throne again. He looked at his own hands with sadness and said that 5 days had passed, so why had nothing come yet? The girl spread her arms wide and said that the resources taken from the Black Bear camp were distributed throughout the city. She advised the chief that action should be taken. The man stretched sleepily and then said that they would not wait any longer, now they would have to act. But suddenly a grandpa with a mohawk burst into their room. He called the head, shouting loudly about it. The old man had purple hair. He started repeating the same word, which meant that everything had arrived. The man smiled widely. Lin Bei perked up. He asked enthusiastically how many there were. The girl tried to cover her own smile with her hand. In the girl's eyes, instead of the sky, the man in front of her kept saying that there really was a lot of them there. The man with long hair looked fearfully at the robber, whose eyes literally glowed with stars and sparks of joy. In another place not far from the city of Chingshu, 3 people were walking. One was a tall adult man with a beard that was tied into a braid, and he was carrying a huge knife in his hands. Behind him was a young guy with a fan in his hands. He had long snow-white hair, and also a girl with chestnut hair and roses in it. Suddenly another man appeared behind them. It was the head of the Black Bear. He came closer to the man with the pigtail and said that today he would skin that scoundrel to calm the hatred in his heart. The man had a black patch over one eye. He held out his sword and told him not to worry because their 4 camps were connected by blood. If they insulted him, they insulted them too. The man with blue eyes snapped his fan shut and told him not to worry because soon they would leave their camps to leave only ashes in their place. The girl with the sly and beautiful purple eyes mockingly said that when they stumble upon that handsome man, they can leave him to her. The girl was wearing bright pink clothes.